Chapter 686. The light from ecstasy. Moon lit up the entire space in the blink of an eye. The demon fox beast stood quietly within the light, carefully feeling the power that was continuously pouring into its body. Under the effect of ecstasy, Moon, its slender body gradually turned into a pinkish-white light. The change was intensifying. Demon Fox Beast I and Diru Beast were the digital beasts owned by the female lead of the third and first Digimon respectively. They had the same level of positioning and huge potential. Since Diru Beast could rely on the incomplete pride to evolve into Fairy Beast, then Demon Fox Beast could do the same. Dake was holding this thought at this moment. Therefore he stared at Demon Fox Beast with unusual concentration. Demon Fox Beast was also trying its best to respond to his expectations. It lowered its body, and its four limbs were on the ground, changing from its human form to its beast form. Remember the website, MVIP Kanshu. 6. When it stood up again, it changed from its beast form to its human form. Demon Fox Beast, as complete form, Sacrificial Beast, was a demon-type digital beast. It hid in the darkness and lived in the darkness. Even if it wasn't a subspecies, it was still a spirit of the night, and it was born with the dark attribute. Therefore, Ecstasy, Moon Eye and Sacrificial Beast, S compatibility was also very high. After Demon Fox Beast transformed into Nine-Tailed Fox Beast, it could feel the dark energy gathering in its heart, and the desire in its heart gradually surfaced. It suddenly lowered its head and covered its eyes, not letting anyone see the strong desire in its eyes. However, the speed at which it absorbed Ecstasy, Moon's power suddenly increased. Ecstasy, Moon's light started to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, all the power was absorbed by it, and only a human figure was left on the ground. From the silhouette, the figure was very detailed, and it could be seen that it was a demon fox wearing a yin-yang master robe. The difference between it and the original Sacrificial Beast was that it was more female. But that was it. Its silhouette started to flash barcodes like an old television, and it gave people a strange feeling that it could break at any time. Dake sucked in a deep breath and focused. He cast the three-flower art, and used it to activate his spirit force. Blissful Moon was still a flawed item. Just like when the Diru Beast evolved into the Fairy Beast, it needed the help of spiritual energy to break through. So did the Demon Fox Beast. However, Dake was hesitant. He wasn't sure if there was a bond between him and the Fox Demon, and he wasn't sure how effective his spirit power would be on it. After all, the Demon Fox was not close to him. However, this worry was like a cloud in the sky, dispersing with a poke. Dida. It was like a drop of water dripping into his heart, causing ripples to spread out. The bliss emblem appeared in the depths of Dake Diming's eyes. His spirit power was tainted with the attribute of bliss, and leaned towards darkness. At the next moment, he could clearly sense that on the other side of his spirit force, there was an additional consciousness that was filled with strong desires. The bond between the two of them had silently connected. Although it wasn't as strong as the bond between the Diru Beast and the Little Devil Beast, the line had been formed. As Dake's control over his spirit force became more proficient, his perception of the bond also became clearer. He could even sense the thinner bond. However, the moment the bond was connected, the emotions on the other side of the bridge suddenly exploded. Layers of strong desires surged through the bond bridge. It was a burning passion that didn't match the calm appearance of the Demon Fox Beast. The originally narrow bridge was forcibly opened up by this fiery and turbulent emotion. Dake could clearly feel the burning passion in the Demon Fox Beast's heart. His spirit power seemed to want to give a response as it expanded instantly. The Demon Fox Beast's current form was completely stabilized under the injection of this energy. The barcode that was blinking frequently disappeared instantly, and the evolved form of the Demon Fox Beast gradually revealed itself. That boiling hot emotion was once again wrapped up in layers after it was channeled, like the Sacrificial Beast's thick clothing. Demon Fox Beast, Sacrificial Beast. The Sacrificial Beast returned to its Demon Fox form, but it was bigger than the Demon Fox Beast. It was wearing a white yin-yang Taoist robe, and the Tai Chi pattern embroidered on its chest was unusually eye-catching. Its shoulders were raised high like horns, and it had a black pointy hat on its head. The sacrificial beast's aura quickly retracted, and the dark aura on its surface made it even colder. He showed a smile and welcomed the arrival of the sacrificial beast with a celebratory heart. However, the sacrificial beast only put its hands together and nodded coldly. However, to Dake, who had experienced the burning passion in its heart, the coldness on its face was a stark contrast. Dake was pleasantly surprised, and the first thing he did was to check the transformed sacrificial beast's magic conducting card. As the magic conducting card was infused with magic conducting card's information. Card name, sacrificial beast, type, elf card, level, race, bird/beast, attribute, fairy/dark, magic power, 4000, attack, 3200, defense, 3000, ultimate skills, Yin Yang Dao, Fox Seal Scroll, Brahma Brush Flash, Death Talisman, from the Demon Fox Beast's Fairy attribute to the Nine-Tailed Fox Beast's Fairy/Fire, attribute to the Sacrificial Beast's Fairy/Dark attribute. The change in attributes was huge. However, other than that, the Sacrificial Beast and the Nine-Tailed Fox Beast's 3 measurements were of the same origin. It also had a strong attack and defense, but its most outstanding attribute was still its magic power. A total of 4,000 points of magic power showed its bias to the fullest. Although it could summon a huge writing brush to attack its enemies, it specialized in flexible and versatile spells. Dake glanced at the ultimate skills column, and his heart skipped a beat. He immediately injected more magic power into it to get feedback. The first sure kill skill of the sacrificial beast was Yin Yang Dao. It was an ultimate skill that had never appeared in the original Digimon, but it was the core of the sacrificial beast card. Yin Yang Dao. The sacrificial beast is proficient in Yin Yang Dao. When it uses Yin Yang Dao to attack, its power will be greatly increased. It can summon and control spirit-branded retainers. The former was passive, while the latter was active. Dake's gaze paused and he frowned. It can summon and control spirit-branded retainers? The sacrificial beast, who didn't show any emotion after its successful evolution, said in a low and hoarse voice, "As long as I can master the summoning technique." Dake was speechless. After a while he raised his head and asked, "So you have to study it yourself?" The sacrificial beast nodded slightly. Dake understood. Spirit-branded retainers, also known as totemic retainers, referred to the spiritual bodies of Onmyosis, and were the core power of Onmyosis. The sacrificial beast was a natural-born Onmyosis, so it was normal for it to be able to summon and control spirit-branded retainers. However, there were no Onmyosis in this world, so naturally, there were no spirit-branded retainers, and there were no relevant documents for reference. If the sacrificial beast wanted to summon and control spirit-branded retainers, it would have to do its own research. However, as long as it could do its research, it would gain something. The existence of the sure kill technique, Yin Yang path, already explained a lot. The appearance of the sacrificial beast might bring a different power system to this world. Although this power system might not be able to compare to magical engineering technology. Think about it carefully. The summoning and controlling of spirit-branded retainers is similar to the summoners of the past. Perhaps I can learn something from the summoner's books? Dake said to the sacrificial beast. He was very curious about the spirit-branded retainers of Yin Yang path, and he was looking forward to it. Once the sacrificial beast's research was successful, it would be able to summon and control spirit-branded retainers, and it would form a unique combat system. Star level, stats, and measurements would no longer be able to restrict it. Dake had always wanted to let the magical engineering fairies master magic, and even magical engineering technology, but the progress was slow. Now that the sacrificial beast had appeared, it could be said that he had realized his idea from another path. However, the path ahead was long, and he still needed to be patient. He calmed down a little and looked at the sacrificial beast's second sure kill technique. Fox Sealing Scroll. Fox Sealing Scroll and Fame Brush Flash were both skills that had left a deep impression on him. Fox Sealing Scroll. The sacrificial beast can control a talisman to bind the target's body. At the same time, it can cause the talisman to explode and attack the target. Different from Yin Yang path, This was a very straightforward sure-kill technique that combined control and explosive power. As a part of the yin-yang path, it not only had the fairy's sure-kill technique bonus, but it also had the passive bonus of yin-yang path. Its power was not inferior to the nine-tailed fox's sure-kill techniques. Similarly, there was another sure-kill technique, Feign Brush Flash. Feign Brush Flash. The sacrificial beast can summon a huge brush and use it to draw the word on in the air while chanting an incantation. The enemy that is hit by the Feign Brush Flash will be destroyed by a huge explosion. Additional damage plus 500. Burning Brush Flash was divided into two parts. One was the yin-yang curse, and the other was the huge brush that was summoned. It was purely a curse attack with a passive bonus, and its power was greater than the Fox Sealing Scroll's explosion. The giant brush it summoned could be used as a weapon, granting it an additional 500 points of attack power. Sure-kill techniques like this were quite common, but they were very useful and popular. Dake was satisfied. There's one more sure-kill technique left. He continued to infuse magic to check. The sacrificial beast's last sure-kill technique was the Death Talisman. It was also a yin-yang curse, but it was the only dark-type sure-kill technique. Death Talisman. The sacrificial beast can use the Death Talisman to summon a spherical barrier to protect itself from enemy attacks. This sure-kill technique looks similar to Guard, but it seems to have a wider range and more comprehensive protection. As for the duration of the barrier, the upper limit of its endurance, and so on, they all need to be measured. Also, can the sacrificial beast use its sure-kill technique within the Death Talisman barrier? These thoughts quickly flashed through Dake's mind. Dake looked at the sacrificial beast again and said softly, "Then let's hurry up and test it." It wasn't convenient to test its power, but it wasn't a problem for other tests. Dake tested the Fox Sealing Scroll's binding effect, the Burning Brush Flash's power, and the Death Talisman as characteristics. The results showed that the Fox Sealing Scroll's binding effect wasn't as strong as expected, and it seemed to be more of a killing technique. The Burning Brush Flash's brush was too big, and although the sacrificial beast could easily wield it, it was very difficult to use it as a weapon. As for the Death Talisman, the sacrificial beast could use its sure-kill technique when it activated the Death Talisman barrier, but the Death Talisman's duration was very short, and it couldn't be activated for a long time. On the other hand, its defensive effect might be unexpectedly strong. 15 minutes later, the sacrificial beast reverted back to a demon fox. However, the demon fox's eyes were unusually bright. Dake could tell at a glance that it couldn't wait to go to the library to look for books related to summoning. The sacrificial beast's evolution gave it the talent to become a onmyoji, and he wondered if it could be used in its normal state after developing the spirit-branded retainer summoning technique. If it could be used, Dake shook his head and cut off this fantasy. Then he said, "Let's go in the afternoon. I'll go with you." He didn't have classes in the afternoon, and he was also curious about the spirit-branded retainer summoning technique. Moreover, the summoning technique of the spirit-branded retainer could be used in addition to the summoning technique of the summoner, and perhaps the undead summoning technique of the necromancer. The undead summoning technique was taboo. Without him, the demon fox wouldn't be able to obtain any books related to it. As for now, his evolution experiment wasn't over yet. The next experiment subject will be the Ball Sea Lion. Curse Cage, Little Devil Beast, Curse Cage, Sub-Beast, Dream Demon, and Demon Fox evolution experiments were all completed. Fantasy Beast, Ever-Changing Monster, could only reach 6 stars under the effect of Ecstasy, Moon. Fantasy Beast, Ivan could evolve, but it would most likely only become a 6 stars Fantasy Beast, Moon Ivan. In theory, there shouldn't be any accidents with either of them. However, Fantasy Beast, Moon Ivan might have some changes in its killing move. But that change could be seen later. What Dake wanted to know was whether the Ball Sea Lion could evolve under the effect of Ecstasy Moon. As half of Ecstasy's incarnation, the Ball Sea Lion was theoretically more compatible with Envy, but what if enough Ecstasy's power was poured into its body? Even if it could achieve a breakthrough, it wouldn't be impossible. Next target, 20K. Chapter 687. Chio Sea Lion, Rippling Flower Sea Lion, West Lion Siren. The first two forms of Chio Sea Lion were of the water element, and it would only gain the fairy attribute after it evolved into West Lion Siren. Before that, the fairy attribute was hidden in its body like a hidden talent. According to normal logic, Chio Sea Lion needed the Great Sin card of Envy to evolve into Rippling Flower Sea Lion, and then Bliss on top of Envy to evolve into West Lion Siren. Therefore, it was very difficult to use Bliss's Great Sin card to evolve it. Dark's experiments all this time had also proved this point. However, everything was about quantitative change that led to qualitative change. It was undeniable that Bliss did exist in Chio Sea Lion's body. Now what needed to be seen was the strength of Bliss, Moon Eye, and whether or not it could be triggered. When Dake called Chio Sea Lion to his side, it revealed a timid look of surprise. Website: https://m. Vipcanchu. VIP as one of the characters that was always at the bottom. Chio Sea Lion had never been treated coldly, but when everyone talked about battles, it was always unable to get a word in. Over time, it had developed feelings of inferiority, and when it was alone in the pool, it would secretly look at the other magic elves with envy. Although Horned Eagle Man, who was born at the same time as it, had similar troubles, that guy had a one-track mind and was always hot-blooded every day, so he didn't have the time to think about these things. On the other hand, Chio Sea Lion was meticulous and super sensitive. Under such circumstances, it did not develop any jealousy because of this. It was because Dark Diamond's family style was too upright. Therefore, when it was called to Dake's side, it was still hesitant and confused. Dake observed Chio Sea Lion's micro-expressions and sighed in his heart. He realized that he was too busy with his research every day and didn't care about the magic elves. Come, let's see if you can evolve. He touched Chio Sea Lion's head and took out Bliss Moon. Chio Sea Lion asked, still confused. Thinking about it, he also felt that this blissful black moon was not suitable for him. Let's give it a try. Perhaps it will work? Dake said encouragingly. Chio Sea Lion lowered its head and nodded slightly. Dake then placed Moon of Bliss in front of it and summoned it. In the name of Dake Dimung, I summon Blissful Moon. Following the end of the summoning spell, a pink radiance was released from Elysium Moon. The Ball Sea Lion was bathed in the light as if it was draped in a starry veil. Its originally cute appearance became even more demonic. Dake carefully sensed the changes in its energy, and found that it was indeed absorbing the energy of Bliss. On its forehead, the emblem of Bliss was slowly manifesting. This was solid proof that it had the potential of Bliss. Although it was slow, it was gathering power in its body. Momo, the Ball Sea Lion, seemed to have sensed that it was about to transform. Its originally uncertain expression was suddenly replaced by surprise. It opened its arms, straightened its tail, and emitted a dazzling radiance. Moon of Bliss was evolving into its next form. All the magic elves that had gathered were attracted by the radiance. They obviously did not expect the Ball Sea Lion to succeed. Menus, who had just joined the big family, had its eyes gleaming. It felt an extremely intimate aura from the Ball Sea Lion. The evolution process was very smooth. Moon of Bliss successfully triggered the Ball Sea Lion's potential, allowing it to evolve successfully. When the light of evolution finally disappeared, the Ball Sea Lion had obviously grown taller, as if it had jumped from kindergarten to elementary school. Whether it was its external appearance or internal temperament, it had changed. Its eyes were wide open, radiant, and obviously, it had regained its confidence. Compared to when it was still a Ball Sea Lion, it now had more human-like features. Not only did the wavy collar on its neck become like a skirt, but there were also two braids on its head. His originally dark blue skin had also become lighter and more layered. All in all, it had become more beautiful. Dake saw its final form and felt something in his heart. I see. Moon of Bliss on the Ball Sea Lion has the same effect as Great Sin 3. He picked up the magic guide card and checked it. As expected, the Ball Sea Lion evolved into the Rippling Flower Sea Lion, which was a second-tier 5-star magic guide spirit. What surprised him was that the rippling flower sea lion's attribute wasn't purely water. It was water plus fairy. The sudden change made him look at menus uncontrollably. It had also changed from a pure water attribute to a water plus fairy attribute. Both of them emitted a similar aura. The ball sea lion suddenly hugged Dake's thigh and looked up at him with teary eyes. Dake squatted down and rubbed against it intimately. He congratulated it. Looks like it's a success. Chio sea lion smiled shyly, and his cheeks blushed. After dawdling for a while, Dake picked up the rippling flower sea lion's magic guide card and infused it with magic to get feedback. Picture card name, rippling flower sea lion, type, spirit card level, race, bird/beast attribute, water/fairy magic power, 2200 attack, 2300 defense, 2100, ultimate skills, sing sucking kiss aria of bubbles. The rippling flower sea lion's 3 attributes were very average. It didn't have many weaknesses and wasn't too outstanding. Moon of Bliss didn't make its 3 attributes too high. However, it was already an accident that it could evolve. Naturally, he couldn't pursue more. Dake turned his attention to the rippling flower sea lion's ultimate skills column. The ball sea lion's ultimate skills were moist sound and seductive sound. Although it looked like a combination of passive and active skills, it wasn't very useful. After it evolved into the rippling flower sea lion, there was finally a change in its ultimate skills. It had 3 ultimate skills. It changed from a blue card to an orange card. And these 3 surekill skills belonged to 3 different attributes. The first ultimate skill, Sing, belonged to the normal attribute. Sing. The rippling flower sea lion's voice is comfortable and beautiful. It can make the opponent fall into a state of sleep without them knowing. Sing was without a doubt a very powerful ultimate skill. Dake's strong impression of this ultimate skill came from a certain fatty, who would use a marker pen to draw on people's faces when it was angry. With this ultimate skill, if Dake wanted to fall asleep quickly, he didn't need Little Devil Beast's Devil's Hypnosis anymore. Obviously, falling asleep while listening to the rippling flower sea lion's voice was more enjoyable. However, in reality, Sing would take some time to take effect. It wouldn't be like in the game where one would automatically wake up after 1 to 3 rounds. Those who fell into sleep, due to Sing, would generally wake up naturally. However, on the other hand, there were a lot of factors that could wake a person up from the sleep status. After all, sleep, caused by Sing, wasn't a curse. If one had to describe it, it could only be considered as a deeper sleep. A strong stimulus would naturally wake people up from their deep sleep. In short, in order to fully master and use this ultimate skill, Sing, one would have to go through a detailed test. If one could master it, it would have a wide range of applications. Dake took a deep breath and looked at the rippling flower sea lion's second ultimate skill, Sucking Kiss. Sucking Kiss was a fairy's ultimate skill. Sucking Kiss. The rippling flower sea lion throws a flying kiss at the target, absorbing the target's life force, magic, and recovering half of the damage dealt. Sucking Kiss had a power of 50 in the game, which was only 1/3 of Cannon Bubble. Therefore, it was far from being a powerful surekill skill. However, its endurance was very impressive. It could absorb half of the damage dealt, which was very good. However, compared to Sing, it didn't seem that outstanding. After a brief analysis, Dake looked at the rippling flower sea lion's last ultimate skill. It was also the ultimate skill that he was most concerned about, Aria of the Bubble. Aria of Bubbles was a very special water element surekill skill. It was an exclusive ultimate skill that only the rippling flower sea lion's ultimate evolution, West Lion Siren, could master. West Lion Siren's original form was the siren from Greek mythology. According to the legends, the siren could use her beautiful singing to lure sailors, causing their ships to crash into the rocks. The skill that was derived from this was Aria of the Bubble. Other than the power of Aria of the Bubble itself, it also gave West Lion Siren the special ability to use the sound waves of her singing to control the water element. West Lion Siren would dance while releasing water balloons around it. It would use the sound waves of her singing to control them, just like a dream. Aria of the Bubble. Under the stimulation of bliss, the rippling flower sea lion learned the West Lion Siren's ultimate skill in advance. It also gained the ability to control water balloons through its singing. Opponents that are attacked by Aria of the Bubble will be healed from the burn status. The ultimate skill that was both beautiful and powerful was Aria of the Bubble. For the West Lion Siren, battles were like a stage. They would give their prey a fatal blow while singing and dancing. From Aria of the Bubble, Dake saw the potential of the rippling flower sea lion, and even the little ball sea lion. Now that the potential had been activated, even if it degenerated, this talent wouldn't disappear completely. If the little ball sea lion could learn water magic, it would be much easier. Out of the 3 ultimate skills of the rippling flower sea lion, the first 2 weren't easy to test, so Dake let it perform Aria of the Bubble first. Thus, the rippling flower sea lion that evolved for the first time climbed onto the fountain under everyone's gaze. While it was creating bubbles, it started to hum softly. Heartsuit. The song wasn't seductive, but it was more seductive than seductive voice. The increasing number of bubbles turned the fountain into the most beautiful stage. The rippling flower sea lion sang loudly on this stage, expressing its joy to its heart's content. After the song ended, Dake made all the necessary preparations and started to test the effect of singing. The most direct way to avoid singing was to block the ears. If you couldn't hear, you wouldn't be affected. However, blocking the ears wouldn't work. It wouldn't be able to completely block the transmission of the sound. The most direct and effective way that Dake could think of was silent spell. Whether it was singing or Aria of the Bubble, they were all restrained by silent spell. This was a common drawback of the ultimate skills of the sound wave type. The final test result was as expected. However, after being hypnotized by singing, the degree of sleep was much deeper than expected. Especially in the first 2 minutes, when it was first hypnotized, it could be said that it was dead asleep. Even the sharp pain of being pierced by a needle couldn't wake it up. However, the degree of sleep would quickly become lighter as time passed, and it would eventually become like normal sleep. Of course, the specific effect also had a lot to do with the physical condition of the hypnotized person. Time was limited, so he couldn't test more. After 15 minutes, the rippling flower sea lion degenerated into a ball sea lion in the light. However, after it tried to spit out bubbles and hummed softly, it could actually make the bubbles jump along with the melody of the song. This made it so happy that it danced in the fountain. During lunch, it was especially relaxed and ate an extra bowl after lunch. Dake waited for the cool down of Ecstasy, Moon to finish before summoning Illusory Beast, Ivan, to do a simple test. Illusory Beast. Ivan evolved into a 6-star, Illusory Beast, Moon Ivan under the effect of Ecstasy, Moon Ivan. Card name, Illusory Beast Moon Ivan. Type, Elf card. Level, 4all. Race, Bird Beast Attribute, Evil, Magic Power, 2500, Attack, 2400 Defense, 3000. Ultimate Skills, Moonlight Evil Wave Defense Swap Deception. Basically, this Illusory Beast, Moon Ivan, was no different from Illusory Beast, Moon Ivan after using Ecstasy 3 Moon. The only difference was the change in the ultimate skills. And very subtly, Black Gaze Ecstasy was replaced with Defense Swap of the super ability type. Although Black Gaze Ecstasy had the flaw of being unable to move while casting, it was a true single target control ability. On the other hand, Defense Swap uses super ability to swap the defense of oneself and the opponent. From the literal meaning, defense exchange, and kettle. Equal distribution of strength, equal distribution of defense, and power cantrip were both sure-kill super skills that directly changed one's offense and defense. However, Illusory Beast, Moon Ivan's defense was as high as 3000 points, and it was one of the best among the second-tier magic elves. If it was used against third-tier magic elves, it would probably only be effective for a short period of time, just like Kettle. Moreover, even among third-tier magic elves, there were many whose defense was not as high as his. Then, is the best way to use it to swap defense with the right side to protect one's companions. But for the Moon Ivan of the evil type, this method of using it is a little out of place. Dake's eyes flashed as he thought about it. This 6-star, illusory beast, Moon Ivan retained Deception's ultimate skill, which could be used to counterattack. Now that it had grasped Defense Swap, it should have been a very powerful combination. It could use the opponent's strength to attack the opponent's weakness, using the opponent's strength to attack the opponent's weak defense. But why was it like this? This is really hard to deal with. Dake shook his head and temporarily gave up on thinking about it. Bliss, Moon also gave illusory beast, Moon new possibilities. Perhaps it would be useful in some strange and special situations. Instead of thinking about this, it was better to create a new Bliss, Moon. To be honest, after these 2 days of testing, Dake had already tasted the benefits. However, the Bliss 3 Moon required 110 points of Moon God's version Bliss. After using 32 points of Moon God's version Bliss to create a Bliss 3 Moon I and 25 points of Moon God's version Bliss to create A-, he had spent a total of 167 points of Moon God's version Bliss. 167 points. Almost half of the 337 points. From Wednesday afternoon until now, the Moon God's soul had been absorbing Flower Card as Moon God's version of Bliss, but the rate of increase had slowed down a lot. After almost a day, Moon God's version of Bliss had only increased by a few dozen points. It was foreseeable that as time passed, the rate of increase would become slower and slower. Therefore, Moon God's version of Bliss was also limited. It couldn't be like leaks, where there would be more after cutting one batch. He needed to re-establish his sense of frugality and use it sparingly. I hope this weekend, when Traveler's Street reopens, it will usher in a new burst of growth. Dake sorted out his thoughts, put the magic card back into the card bag, took the demon fox, and prepared to go to the library. As for the Bliss Moon experiment, only the 2 Duolong Messiah that accompanied Duolong Baluto hadn't been done yet. But considering that the most he could do was evolve Duolong Messiah from a 5-star Duolong Wonder to a 6-star Duolong Wonder, Dake prepared to test it later. In short, the possibility of using Bliss Moon on Duolong Messiah was very low, so he didn't pay too much attention to it. 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Dake brought the demon fox into the library and looked up to see Senior Panduola behind the counter. Although Panduola Doragon was at work, she seemed to have changed to another place to study. Now she was gritting her teeth and thinking hard, which was rare. Perhaps she had encountered a problem. And in the seat where she used to sit was the pure white dragon maiden, who had activated its spiritual intelligence. But at this time the pure white dragon maiden was only pretending to be dull. Like a magic fairy with intelligence level close to 3. It was replacing Panduola to register for entry and exit. It wasn't until Dake walked in front of it that it revealed a small smile. And its eyes flickered. Dake nodded at it, took the registration form, and wrote down his name and the demon fox's name. The latter's actions made the pure white dragon maiden's eyes light up, and the gaze she looked at Dake became gentler. So much so that the demon fox, who was following closely behind Dake, looked at it coldly. Dake, why are you here today? Panduola looked up and asked casually. Although they were busy with their studies and didn't contact each other often, because they had the secret passage's door card, they still sent each other short messages. As for the flower card, that was trending recently, she didn't seem to pay attention to it because she was too busy. This meant that the flower card hadn't really touched every corner of the school. Dake said, I brought the demon fox to look for some things. Okay. Panduola nodded and said, by the way, what do you want for Christmas this year? Dake was stunned and stopped walking into the library. He didn't expect Panduola to ask such a question so casually in this situation. Shouldn't Christmas gifts be more mysterious? Men and women hid it from each other until Christmas night, and then opened it at the same time in the pink atmosphere to experience the surprise of giving each other gifts. Dake paused and said, can I take it as a promise that I'll definitely receive a Christmas gift this year? Panduola looked up and smiled faintly. What are you talking about? Isn't this something that's guaranteed? Dake's fingers moved slightly, and he wanted to raise his hand to hide something, but he controlled himself and said, then this year, Senior should be free for Christmas, right? Pandula rolled her eyes and said, "If you're talking about the ball before Christmas, I haven't received an invitation yet. If you're talking about Christmas, I'll be staying with my mother at the school this year." The meaning of her words was very clear. Dake didn't hesitate and took the initiative to invite her. "Then this year's Christmas ball, can I have the honor of dancing with you?" Pandula smiled and said, "Of course." The two looked at each other in silence, and nothing was said. Cough. The demon fox secretly kicked Dake's heel. Dake then said, "I'll go to the library first." Pandula said, "I have a question to answer too." The two nodded at each other and went their separate ways. However, in the process of entering the library, Dake's attention was already diverted, and he began to think about how to create the ball invitation and what kind of Christmas gift to prepare. Furthermore, how would he spend Christmas Day? "Master!" The demon fox suddenly called out. Dake slowed down his steps. The demon fox then whispered, "Can we also attend the ball before Christmas?" Dake thought for a while and said, "Of course, but you have to wait until after the first speech from the principal." The demon fox nodded slightly and said after a while, "Then can we also look forward to the Christmas gift?" Dake smiled and said, "Of course." As he said that, he returned to his normal pace. However, his heart skipped a beat, and he finally thought of a big problem that needed to be solved. He had to prepare a lot of Christmas gifts this year. In the Shungmalian Academy's library, one could find almost all the books that had existed in this world. Therefore, what troubled the students was not whether there were books in the library, but how to find the books that they wanted. Dake and the demon fox were in a similar situation at this moment. Regardless of whether it was books related to summoners or necromancers, they only recorded history, famous people, and very general introductions. It was no doubt impossible to find magic books related to summoners and necromancers on the common bookshelves outside. However, if one continued to go deeper, the countless books that were placed without any order would make one feel hopeless. If he wanted to find what he wanted from these thousands of books, he really needed the guidance of fate. However, Dake obviously did not have this fate. He could only do his best to help the demon fox search. This search took him an entire afternoon. He did not find the magic book that he wanted, but he did find a lot of interesting books. He picked out 2 of them and prepared to read in his free time. There's still the astrology class at night. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly noticed that the demon fox was gone. The demon fox? Dake frowned and called out softly, but there was no response. He could feel that the demon fox was beside him, but he could not see it. With a trace of doubt, he began to move between the bookshelves, trying to find the demon fox by following his senses. However, after a few minutes of fruitless searching, the demon fox suddenly came out from between the bookshelves, and there was a book with a black cover in its hands. Dake looked at the book and asked curiously, "You found it?" The demon fox nodded lightly, "Yes." Dake asked, "How did you find it?" The demon fox looked away and said, "I got lost." The bookshelves in the library were all the same style. The outer bookshelves had labels, but inside, they were almost the same. There was not much difference at a glance. It was normal to lose one's sense of direction when there was no reference. However, Dake still felt that it was strange. He glanced at the countless bookshelves behind the demon fox, and quickly said, "It's good that you found it. Let's go out first." As he spoke, he quickly walked out with the demon fox, and went to the reading room. Most of the students in the Shungmalian Academy would have more places to go after they were promoted to the second year. Basically, they would not stay in the reading room of the library for a long time. Therefore, Dake's fixed seat was already occupied by the first-year students. He found a quiet corner and sat down with the demon fox. Only then did he ask in a low voice, "What book is it?" The demon fox directly pushed the book in its hands in front of Dake. Dake frowned slightly, reached out to take it, and lowered his head to look. On the book with a black cover, there were 3 words written in golden font. It was not the font used today. With the demon fox, S knowledge level, it should not be able to recognize it. Only then did Dake know that it was not that the demon fox did not want to say it, but that it did not know what book it was. But if it did not even know what book it was, Why did it take it out of the bookshelf? Dake could not help but look at the demon fox. The demon fox obviously knew what Dake wanted to ask. It immediately said, "After I got lost, I saw a bookshelf. The bookshelf originally did not have this book, but when I turned back, I saw it suddenly appear, so I took it out." Dake took a deep breath and said, "There's such a thing?" The demon fox pursed its lips tightly, also frowning in confusion. Dake paused for a moment, then said, "This is a necromancy book." "Necromancy book? What's that?" The demon fox was confused. Dake explained, "In short, it's a magic book for necromancers. It usually records a method to summon spirits. Perhaps it's the book we need." The demon fox nodded, but did not let down its guard. It did not believe that a free lunch would fall from the sky. Therefore, although it took out the book, it still felt that there was something wrong. However, Dake knew that the problem was most likely not with the book, but with the library. It was precisely because this kind of thing often happened in the Shungmalian Academy's library that they could not be sure if the nameless book that recorded the method to raise a brain fluid demon was brought in by someone, or if a student obtained it from the library. For example, the necromancy book in front of them did not have any magical waves, and they could not tell that it was dangerous. It was not a high-level magic book that had a consciousness. However, the content recorded in this book might not be safe. Dake wiped the gold powder that printed the book's title and thought, "If I remember correctly, this should be the Lu Ling language that Professor Ryan Hex mentioned in the History of Magic. It was once widely used in the Lu Ling Kingdom. It was a small kingdom that was located underground. It was destroyed thousands of years ago. If we want to decipher it, we need a translation book." "I'll go find it," the demon fox blurted out. Dake smiled helplessly. "I'll go find it." After spending another half an hour, Dake found the translation book that recorded the Lu Ling language according to the label. After that, he did not stay in the library any longer. He went straight to the counter to borrow the book, went to the cafeteria to have a simple meal, and then went straight back to his dorm. After he sat down, he looked at the clock on the wall and said to himself, "It's 6 o'clock sharp. I still have an hour to spare. I can take a look first." Thus, he opened the necromancy book and compared it with the translation book. The Lu Ling language was not complicated, but it was very troublesome. Moreover, the recognition between the characters was very low, and it was very difficult to read. This was the first time Dake had a deep understanding of the Lu Ling language, so his progress was very slow at the beginning. It took him a full half an hour to finish translating the first page. However, as he gradually became more familiar with the characters, the translation speed also increased. After an hour, he had roughly translated the first part of the necromancy book, and finally had a basic understanding of the book. First of all, this was a necromancy book. It looked very thick, but because the material of the book was very thick, there was not much content in the book. According to the previous part, the following part basically talked about how to collect soul fragments from corpses, and then sew them together into a complete soul that could be used. The author of this book called the soul that was sewn together Soul of the Dead. Because the soul of the dead was sewn together from different soul fragments, its consciousness was very chaotic. It was basically an evil spirit that did not have any thoughts, and could only follow orders to do some simple work. In addition, the corpses that he used to collect the soul fragments were all stolen from a mass grave. The quality was very poor, and the souls that were sewn together were very weak. However, even small people had ambitions. The author of the necromancy book fantasized about collecting soul fragments from the corpses of powerful people, and sewing them together into a powerful soul of the dead. In short, this was not a normal book that should appear in the hands of a student. Dake closed the book, took a deep breath, and stuffed it into the drawer. He said to the fox beast, "Before I give you permission, don't read it." The fox beast had been standing beside him the whole time, and it immediately nodded. From Dake's attitude, it could faintly feel the danger of this necromancy book. This was a forbidden book. During the astrology class, Dake was not paying attention. He could have learned 30% of the content, but in the end he only learned 20%. He had to spend time after class to understand the remaining 80%. After the astrology class, he quickly returned to the dorm. After confirming that the drawer had not been flipped through, he took out the necromancy book and continued to read it. Necromancers had a very deep understanding of souls. In their hands, souls were like pieces of paper that they could use as they wished. They unscrupulously used tools and spells to cut and piece souls together, creating countless ugly and twisted things. The author of this necromancy book only used soul fragments from corpses as materials. It was already considered a very simple book among necromancers. However, this did not change the fact that it was desecrating the dead. After a person died, their soul could stay in the human world for a maximum of 168 hours. Normal souls would dissipate within 24 hours. Therefore, if one wanted to collect soul fragments, they had to use fresh corpses. This was a behavior that could not be tolerated in the secular world. Dake continued to translate because there were many things in this necromancy book that were worth learning. Desecrating the dead was forbidden. However, if one wanted to save them, one had to understand. Doctors had to dissect corpses in the process of learning. However, he only obtained knowledge from books. First, there was mending. Although the author of this necromancy book was not famous, its method of mending souls was unique. One had to know that even stitched monsters would collapse due to conflicts between their bodies and bloodlines, let alone the more fragile and sensitive souls. However, the author of this necromancy book was able to use countless fragments to piece together a human shape, and the final soul of the dead did not collapse due to the differences between souls. How could he learn this sewing technique? Perhaps it could become a secret strategy when he encountered related matters in the future. Furthermore, the soul of the dead was ultimately a composite of souls. How did the author prevent the composite of souls from dissipating? This method was also worth learning. Apart from that, there was nothing else to see. Even if the demon fox could use this method to create a spirit-branded retainer, he wouldn't let it use it. Rather than that, I might as well go to the underground city and catch a ghost-type monster. Saying this, Dake suddenly had an idea. It wasn't impossible. A spirit-branded retainer was a spirit in the end, also a type of ghost-type monster. Even if he couldn't turn a monster into a spirit-branded retainer. What about a magical fairy? The talisman system used by yin-yang masters was quite similar to that of magical cards. If talismans were compared to magical cards, then wouldn't a spirit-branded retainer be a magical fairy? Dake instantly understood and had a feasible idea on how to help the demon fox obtain a spirit-branded retainer. No rush, let's finish reading this book first. He muttered to himself and buried his head in the book. There wasn't much content in the necromancy book. It was already 9 o'clock at night when the astrology class ended. It was only 1 o'clock in the morning when Dark translated the entire book. In other words, he used a total of 5 to 6 hours to finish translating this book. After that, he used another hour to record all the important content in his notebook. After that, he decided to give the necromancy book to Professor Kazair. He couldn't possibly return this book to the library. The next morning, Dake slept until 10 a.m. Only then did he wobble out of bed and wash up. Translating the necromancy book consumed too much of his energy. He still felt tired when he woke up. Although it's a pity, we have to find another way. Dake put the necromancy book into his bag and said to the demon fox, "But with its help, I already have a relatively specific idea on how you can obtain a spirit-branded retainer." "Don't worry." The demon fox was fine with it. Dake then said, "This afternoon I still have a duel. After the duel, we'll start the experiment. Hopefully, it'll be successful." Half an hour later, Dake appeared in Professor Kazair's dormitory. Professor Kazair was a little surprised by his sudden visit, but he still welcomed him warmly. It wasn't until Dake took out the necromancy book that his expression became serious. The necromancy book of the stitched corpse demon? Professor Kazair obviously knew the Luling language. He only flipped through it for 2 minutes before he understood the content. "The book says Soul of the Dead," Dake corrected him. Professor Kazair then said, "That's what it was called in the beginning." Rune Ragnar was a talented necromancer. He was only 12 years old when he wrote this book, and he was self-taught. After that, he grew rapidly. Right after his 16th birthday, he wrote a new necromancy book. In that book, not only did he sow the soul, he also sowed the body. In the end, he tried to combine the two and succeeded. It was also after that he changed the name of Soul of the Dead to Stitched Corpse Demon. Rune Ragnar? Asked Dake. Professor Kazair said. Yes, Rune Ragnar. And he was still alive a few years ago as a lich. Dake was stunned. What about now? Professor Kazair shook his head and said. He's probably still alive. I haven't seen him in a long time. A lich that had lived for 1,000 years. Dake didn't expect Professor Kazair to know the author of this book. He couldn't help but ask, where is he now? Professor Kazair continued to shake his head. I don't know. A crafty rabbit has 3 burrows. Ragnar never stays in one place for more than a year. After leaving the necromancy book, with Professor Kazair, Dake left the teacher's dormitory. There were indeed too many mysteries in this world. A necromancer like Rune Ragnar who had lived for 1,000 years was just an inconspicuous part of the mysteries. A lich was not as beautiful as one imagined. In order to live forever, they gave up everything they had as a human and struggled in pain and madness every day. In fact, they died the moment they turned into liches. They just turned themselves into undead creatures. Rune Ragnar was a relatively pure academic necromancer. He did everything he could to explore the mystery of life and death. But 1,000 years didn't seem to be enough for him to see through life and death. When he really explored the mystery of life and death, it might be time for him to end his life. Dake heard some stories about Rune Ragnar from Professor Kazair, but he just felt a little emotional and put them to the back of his mind. The necromancy book and Rune Ragnar were just a small interlude in his career in the academy. The knowledge he gained from the necromancy book might be useful at some point in the future, or it might not. No one could predict what would happen in the future. Then he went to the cafeteria and returned to the dormitory after eating lunch. Today was November 29th, Friday. He would accept the challenge of Stuart Phone at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Stuart Phone was now a 4th-year student of the House of Nobles. But he wasn't actually an official noble. His father was a meritorious baron, but the baron's title was obtained through meritorious service and wasn't hereditary. If Stuart Phone wanted to continue to enjoy the treatment of nobles after he became an adult, he could only rely on his own efforts to become a new noble. And in order to achieve his goal, he chose to join the Aristocratic History Research Society and became Angus Geoffrey's lackey. On the Easter Duel Festival on April 1st, Stuart Phone attacked Dake because of this, but he was defeated by Dake in the end. And now, 8 months later, he had made a comeback for the same reason. Although Angus Geoffrey was no longer the president of the Aristocratic History Research Society, he was still the son of a senator. As long as Stuart Phone could graduate from the Shungmalian Academy as a top student, Angus Geoffrey would be able to fight for him to become a baron. Stuart Phone did not have much ambition. Being able to become an official noble was already all he pursued. But even so, his desire to win in a duel was real. He longed for victory. 11K, not bad. Keep up the good work today. 20K. Reward has been opened. Looking for monthly votes. Double monthly votes. That's 150 per chapter. You can only get it once a year. It's extremely rare. Asterisk, asterisk, degree, asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 688. This was not the first time Dake Dimming had faced a senior student on the duel stage. Those who had paid attention to him would no longer treat him as a normal second-year student. Especially after he defeated Vern Morse, a 5th-year student from the House of Fools, this situation became even more obvious. Vern Morse was not the top player among the 5th-year students, but he was definitely not a rotten fish or shrimp. With Vern Morse's failure as a precedent, the 4th-year and 5th-year students had fewer worries when they wanted to challenge Dake. Since even Vern Morse lost, isn't it normal for us to not be a match for him? In short, the pressure that the seniors had to bear to challenge the juniors was instantly reduced to an acceptable level. This was one of the reasons why Dake received so many challenges on Tuesday. Anyway, there was no loss if they lost, and if they won, they would gain the title of Dake Diming's winning streak terminator. Therefore, more and more people wanted to duel with him personally. Dake was happy with this development. And the feeling of choosing an opponent from so many challengers was, to be honest, not bad. Remember the website, VIP, can't you? 6. However, in these 2 weeks he could always find opponents that he had defeated in the past among the challengers. Dake was very considerate, and when he encountered such a situation, he would always want to give these old opponents a chance to redeem themselves. Therefore, he accepted Stuart Vern's challenge, and also accepted Angus Jeffrey's challenge. Speaking of Angus Jeffrey, the former president of the Aristocratic History Research Society, was able to regain his courage after being possessed by the underworld fire. His tenacity was much stronger than Dake imagined. I wonder what he thinks of the last duel. Dake came to the open-air duel arena in advance and waited in the waiting room for the contestants. In his free time, he began to think. After that duel, Angus Jeffrey's memory of the underworld fire should have been erased. But the memories of that time should have formed a huge hole in his brain. Moreover, what had happened would not disappear because of this. After his investigation, it should not be difficult for him to reconstruct what had happened. He just did not know if it was related to the underworld fire. Hey Dake. Stuart Vern walked into the waiting room and took the initiative to greet Dake when he saw him. Dake raised his head slightly and saw the fourth-year student's appearance. Stuart Vern's facial features were feminine, his hair was parted in the middle, and his eyes were deep black. His skin was white but slightly rough. His temperament was as gloomy as before. But failure made people grow. After the crushing defeat at the Easter Duel Festival, Stuart Vern's attitude towards the world had clearly changed. Even though he still looked the same on the outside, he had become much smoother on the inside. Good afternoon, Vern Sr. Dake stood to greet the senior. The last time we fought was during the Easter Duel Festival. I didn't expect you to accept my challenge. He still remembered that at the Easter Duel Festival, he was unhappy that Dake, as a first-year student, had squeezed into the third-year stage. Now Dake was only a second-year student, but even a fifth-year student could not hold him down. After the Easter Duel Festival, he had been paying attention to Dake and knew his changes at every stage like the back of his hand. After that, he suddenly realized that some people were born to surpass the social class. His class cleanliness was exposed under constant observation. Now he was finally like a normal person. In the face of Stuart Vern's sigh, Dake smiled and said, "On the road forward, you chase and I catch up. Fighting with past opponents is a better way to test the speed of your improvement." As long as they didn't try to sabotage him in the dark, he would be more than happy to accept such open challenges. The corners of Stetfon's mouth twitched, revealing a sinister smile as he said, "That's what I think too." The atmosphere between the two sides instantly became hostile. "You two." A staff member of the duel club poked his head in and reminded them, "It's time to go on stage." Thus Dark Diamond and Stuart Vern walked out of the waiting room one after another, and walked towards the designated stage for this duel. At this time, the last duel had just ended and the applause had not yet died down. After a long while, many of the audience suddenly realized that Dake Diming had already stepped onto the stage. As a second-year student, Dake Diming's popularity continued to soar. Now he had become a genuine star player. Thus, when he stepped onto the stage, the audience outside the arena burst into thunderous applause. On the other hand, although Stuart Vern was not weak, his past personality did not attract fans. There were very few fans. The popularity of the two sides formed a huge contrast. It was almost one-sided. However, Stuart Vern was not affected by this. After he stepped onto the blue side stage, he laughed and said, "Since I'm already standing here, there's nothing to say. Between duelists, there's only victory and defeat." In the ring, there were quite a few people who had specially come to watch this duel. Even so, Angus Jeffrey stood out among them. He sat in a dark corner with no other students beside him. His face under the hood was even more gloomy than Stuart Vern's. He did not hope that Stuart Vern could win. In fact, his thoughts were very chaotic. Even he himself did not know what he wanted. The deafening applause drowned out his thoughts. He forced himself to concentrate on watching the match. The depression in his heart seemed as though it would explode at any time. The duel between Dake Dimming and Stuart Verne began under the watchful gazes of all kinds of people. Standing on the red side stage, Dake looked around a little, and then took out the card deck from his card pack. Of course, he had adjusted the card deck. However, it was not an adjustment aimed at Stuart Verne. It was just a routine adjustment to add in the new magic conducting cards. By then there were almost no useless cards in the deck. Unless they were all big sin cards, they would have the power to fight in any situation. He activated the card table, and put the card deck into the card slot. Dake raised his head slightly and looked at the opposite side. Stuart Verne had come prepared, and had prepared faster than he had. Both sides' gazes collided in an instant, and then separated in an instant. The necessary exchanges had been finished outside the arena. The only thing left was the duel. The referee's whistle sounded quickly after the shuffling of the cards. The words "preparation stage" appeared in the air through the projection. The applause inside and outside the arena gradually stopped. Even though there were many duels going on at the same time in the open-air arena, almost everyone's eyes were cast on this duel. The applause and cheers would only affect the viewing. If one was not focused enough, they would miss the exciting moments. It was said that the arena of professional competitions had gradually added in post-match replays and analysis. The Shungmalian Academy was undoubtedly behind in this aspect. Beep. The whistle sounded again. Preparation stage. 30s. The battle began. Dake Dimming instantly focused and reached for the cards. Stuart Verne's face was solemn. The first 5 cards were quickly in his hand. This time, he did a very good job of controlling his expression. He did not let his emotions show. On the other hand, Dark Diamond's expression was as calm as ever. He placed the first 5 magic cards in his left hand, and spread them out like a peacock spreading its tail. Then, with a slight sweep, the 5 magic cards were all swept into his mind. Bliss 3 Moon, Fox Demon, Trash Slime, Fantasy Beast, Multiform, Kettle, for Magic Elven cards. Fortunately, I have 3 full cards in Bliss 3 Moon. There is no situation where I have to start with 5 Magic Elven cards. Magic surged up. His mind sped up. Dake thought quickly in the 30 seconds of preparation stage. Among the 5 Magic Elven cards, Bliss 3 Moon was undoubtedly the core. The Magic Elven cards that could be paired with it were Fox Demon and Fantasy Beast, Multiform. However, the 3-star Fantasy Beast, Multiform, in front of him was a puppet that did not have intelligence. It did not have an advantage in a duel. Moreover, in a situation where he could not confirm the opponent's Magic Elven card, it was too risky to start with Fantasy Beast, Multiform. It was more suitable to be used as a trump card later. Fox Demon it is. Battle Stage 1. 30s tick. The sound of the turn changing was instantly heard. Dake pulled out Fox Demon's Magic Elven card from his hand and showed the summoning. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon Fox Demon. Under everyone's gaze, Fox Demon knelt on one knee and appeared from the pure white summoning circle. Attack! Dake pointed to the front and blew the horn at the beginning of the battle. This was a rare choice for someone like him who was good at defense and counterattacking. However, Fox Demon faithfully carried out his order. It exerted strength in its legs and instantly started running. Whoosh! The wind whistled. Fox Demon's slender and strong body shot out like lightning. Although it hadn't used its ultimate skill yet, the speed at which it burst out at full force was still astonishing. Facing the Fox Demon that was charging at him, Stuart Verne immediately gave his Magic Elven card an order. His summoning speed was not slower than Dake's. A Magic Elven card that was like a shadow had already appeared in the blue summoning circle. Thunder Shadowbug Self-Destruct. Under Stuart Verne's somewhat callous command, the shadow-like magic elf abruptly emitted an ear-piercing insect cry. Black lightning bolts burst forth from its body and coiled around its entire body, before abruptly exploding. Card name, Thunder Shadowbug. Type, Elven card. Level, *****. Race, Insect. Attribute, Dark/Electric. Magic power, 1600. Attack, 1300. Defense, 100. Ultimate skill, Lightning flash, shadow lightning explosion. The thunder shadow bug that was born in the Shadowland had both dark and electric attributes. Its magic power exceeded that of a 3-star peak. Its lightning-like speed coupled with its ultimate skill, lightning flash, allowed it to cross a distance of 100 meters in a breath and attack Dake's magic ball. However, Stuart Phone chose to order it to self-destruct on the spot. The so-called self-destruct was shadow lightning explosion. Stuart Phone was very clear that the Fox Demon's speed was also extremely fast. Moreover, it had an ultimate skill that was close to teleportation. However, his Thunder Shadow Bug had a fatal flaw. Its defense was only 100 points. 100 points of defense and 1600 points of magic power. In a situation where speed was not an advantage, it was inevitable that the Thunder Shadow Bug would be killed by the Fox Demon. Therefore, before the Thunder Shadow Bug was killed, he chose to unleash its remaining power. Boom! The blue magic ball soared into the sky under Stuart Phone's control. The Thunder Shadow Bug's self-destruction did not affect the area above it. The way it self-destructed was very special. The lightning that burst out from its body was accompanied by the explosion of shadow energy, wildly radiating in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the Thunder Shadow Bug's body had completely disappeared. The entire area, including the red half of the area, was suddenly covered by this shadow energy and became as dark as ink. On this dark screen, the black lightning seemed to have a consciousness and quickly gathered towards the Fox Demon's feet. The Fox Demon was caught off guard and its feet were entangled by the lightning. The lightning climbed up its feet and spread throughout its body. Its eyebrows suddenly furrowed, and it felt a slight pain on its body, as if it was being bitten by ants. Its body was uncontrollably paralyzed on the spot. What is this? The decrease in magic power of the Fox Demon was very limited, but the numbing effect of the lightning was very obvious. Moreover, as time passed, the pain gradually increased. This meant that the black lightning was breaking through its defense and seeping into its body, trying to destroy it from the inside. Almost at the same time, the red magic ball on Dake's side was also attacked by the black lightning. The magic power of the Barrier of Life was quickly decreasing. Even though Dake reacted quickly and flew up into the sky, its 8,000 HP had already dropped to 500. This was a bad start. As his thoughts flashed, Dake suddenly raised the Bliss 3 moon that he had already prepared. The Thunder Shadow Bug's self-destruction effect was very troublesome to deal with. However, it covered the ground and did not pose a threat to anything in the sky. Since he could not eliminate it temporarily, he would drag the battle to the sky. In the name of Dake Dimming, the Fox Demon's evolution, Nine-Tailed Fox. The bliss power that was poured into the Fox Demon's body caused the numbing effect to temporarily disappear. At that moment, it exploded with all its strength and shot up into the sky like an arrow. Light bloomed. My head hurts a little. My head feels like it's going to explode. I can't take it anymore. I'll sleep for a while and get up at 8 to write. Today, I'm going to go all out, or else I'll be dead. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It's the last 3 days. Please vote if you have. Thank you very much. Chapter 689. Evolve Demon Fox. Golden pink light covered its entire body. The moment the demon fox leaped into the air, it began to evolve. Its slender body quickly expanded, and in the blink of an eye, it turned from a human into a beast. The 9 fluffy tails suddenly stood upright. Blue flames instantly rose from the 4 limbs of the 9-tailed fox, giving it the ability to run in the air. Roar! The black electric current on its body dispersed. The 9-tailed fox stepped on the blue flames and ran in the air. The tip of its tail condensed into a jade-like willow. The wisp. The battlefield instantly shifted to the air. However, Stuart Phone had a deep understanding of Dake. When he saw him summon the demon fox, he had already expected this scene to happen. He did not hesitate. The second magic card was already prepared. In the name of Stuart Phone, I summoned the Absolute Shadow Crow. The circular summoning circle opened up on the barrier in front of the blue platform. The black shadow crow flew out with a shriek, and then grabbed the blue magic ball that flew to the same height. Vanishing Shadow Doppelganger. Following Stuart Phone's calm command, the absolute Shadow Crow and the blue magic ball that it grabbed tightly suddenly split into two and transformed into two identical shadow doppelgangers. In the next moment, the two absolute Shadow Crows flashed and disappeared again. When they appeared again, there were four of them. One split into two, two split into four split into eight, eight split into 16. The doppelgangers of the absolute Shadow Crow did not stop there. With an abnormally terrifying speed, 128 doppelgangers appeared. And these 128 absolute Shadow Crows were all holding onto the blue magic conducting balls. The moment the doppelgangers appeared, they flew to the sky and the ground, filling up the entire space densely. Multiple shadow doppelganger? On the red team's platform, Dark Diamond revealed a look of shock. The sure kill skill used by Stuart Phone's newly summoned magic elf reminded him of a certain Naruto movie's protagonist's prideful skill. He observed carefully and found that every absolute Shadow Crow had the same expression and appearance. They all had the same cold and gloomy appearance. His lack of intelligence seemed to have become his advantage at this moment. Dark couldn't tell which one was real and which one was fake with his naked eyes. Moreover, the absolute cries of Shadow Crows that flew into the sky immediately spread out and covered the entire sky in the blink of an eye, making normal AoE sure kill skills useless. Meanwhile, the absolute Shadow Crows that were diving down actually dove into the shadow veil on the ground. The black electric current didn't move at all, as if it wasn't targeting the absolute Shadow Crows in its search for enemies. It's useless to think too much. The absolute Shadow Crow, absolute Shadow Doppelganger, was indeed very dazzling. Dake quickly reminded himself and gave the nine-tailed fox an order. Nine-tailed fox, Fox Flame Dragon. The nine-tailed fox's best skill, Ghost Fire Jade, had a limited area of effect while Fox Lightning Strike was a single target attack. Only Fox Fire Dragon, if used properly, could wipe out a total of 128 absolute Shadow Crows. Roar. The nine-tailed fox that had lost its target immediately roared, and the flames around it gathered into the shape of a dragon and rushed out with a roar. Get out of the way. The absolute Shadow Crows let out an ear-piercing scream and ran away in a frenzy. However, Fox Flame Dragon was extremely fast in close range and caught up with the absolute Shadow Crows nearby in the blink of an eye. The fire dragon opened its bloody mouth and swallowed the absolute Shadow Crows that were grabbing onto the blue square magic ball one after another. Screams of agony sounded one after another. However, none of them were the real, absolute Shadow Crows. Dake couldn't help but look at the ground and said in a low voice, "Interesting. The absolute Shadow Doppelganger was just a facade. The absolute Shadow Crows must have been hiding in the shadows." However, what Dake didn't expect was that they could carry items and sneak into the shadows. This is quite similar to Scorpio Palace's shadow hiding. If I'm not mistaken, Stuart Phone's Shadow Worm can also dig a hole in the shadow to hide the magic conducting ball. Looks like it's a tactic of changing the ingredients but not changing the medicine. However, whether the medicine was changed or not, it didn't matter as long as it was effective. If Dake could also refine this type of magic fairy, he would definitely use it often. He glanced at the cards in his hand and paid attention to controlling the magic ball to not be ambushed while commanding the nine-tailed fox to continue cleaning up the shadow doppelgangers of the absolute Shadow Crows. The 30-second countdown for the first round quickly passed. Most of the absolute Shadow Crows that were flying around in the air had already been cleaned up, and only a few continued to escape. The nine-tailed fox, Fox Flame Dragon, had already reached the point and switched to controlling the Ghost Fire Jade to continue cleaning up. The blue square player, Tyshawn, felt that Stuart Phone didn't do much either. He was obviously holding back and didn't use any of the remaining 3 cards in his hand. Tick. The sound of the round changing sounded in an instant. Both players' slightly relaxed nerves instantly tensed up. Battle Stage 2. 30s in the next second. Dake Dimming and Stuart Phone drew their cards at the same time and added 2 new magic cards into their hands respectively. Mina's Pride 3, a high-star magic fairy card and a level 3 Great Sin card. As for the Mina's, with the nine-tailed fox present, I only need to add a trash slime to summon it as a sacrifice. I wonder if the Minus S Moon's guard can protect the magic fairy from being paralyzed. Dake thought quickly and suddenly noticed that Stuart Phone had already raised his cards up high, and the summoning sound instantly became louder. In the name of Stuart Phone, I summon the Shadow Doll. It was still the first-tier magic fairy. Stuart Phone didn't put all his effort into refining the high-star magic fairy, like most of the duelists. Although he still had the ability to summon special talents, he focused more on the application of the first-tier and second-tier magic fairies. The Shadow series of cards that he was good at also had many tricks up his sleeves, which was just right for his style. As the summoning ended, a whirlpool formed by black fog appeared in midair of the blue summoning area. A broken doll with a gloomy appearance emerged from the whirlpool and let out a gloomy laugh. Dake suddenly focused his attention. The Shadow Doll was very famous among the Shadow series of magic fairy cards because it was also the standard of the Curse series of cards. Card name Shadow Doll. Type, fairy card. Level, *****. Race, undying species. Attribute, Dark/Spectre. Magic power, 2000. Attack, 100. Defense, 100. Ultimate skill, Life Chain Shadow Curse. The Shadow Doll was only a 3-star Shadow Doll, but it had 2000 points of magic power. Correspondingly, its attack and defense were the most basic 100 points. However, its ultimate skill was extremely strange and impossible to guard against. Nine-tailed fox. Dake was just about to remind him when Stuart Fern said coldly, "Use Life Chain on the nine-tailed fox." It was not Shadow Curse, but Life Chain. Gee! The Shadow Doll immediately let out an even more ear-piercing scream. The audience suddenly realized that watching this duel was very hard on their ears. In the midst of the scream, the Shadow Doll's empty eyes suddenly emitted a red light. The red light formed a magic circle above its eyes. The magic circle spun at high speed, and a strange force exploded. It raised its right hand, stretched out a thin and small finger, and gently pointed at the nine-tailed fox. In the next second, the red light that shot out from its fingertip had already hit the nine-tailed fox's body, leaving a dark red petal-like mark on its side. A black chain shot out from the Shadow Doll's eyes and hit the nine-tailed fox, that was engraved with the mark. The chain shot into the mark and instantly locked it. The chain itself quickly disappeared after the successful activation of Life Chain, leaving only the front and back of the chain. The nine-tailed fox suddenly turned its head and fiercely glared at the Shadow Doll. At that moment, it clearly sensed a strange connection between itself and the tattered rag doll. It was as if there was a string connecting the two of them. However, other than that, it did not feel anything else. It did not lose any of its magic power either. While it was confused, it heard Dake's reminder. Life Chain can link your life with the targets for a short period of time. If one of you is on the verge of death, the other will share 50% of its current life with you. The nine-tailed fox immediately frowned, feeling that this was very troublesome. This Life Chain was a sure kill skill that existed to maintain the lives of its companions. However, the death of the magic fairy was not the end, and it could be used on the opponent. Then, by sacrificing its own life, it would take 50% of the opponent's current life. Of course, if its own life was less than 50% of the opponent's current life, then it could only take its own life. On the Shadow Doll, it would take at most 2,000 life points. Basically, Life Chain was such a sure kill skill. Shadow Dolls were very rare magic fairies to begin with, and there were even fewer of them that had mastered Life Chain. Stuart Fern was able to refine such a rare magic fairy, and it was unknown how many years of his life he had paid for it. The spectators outside the arena understood this, and they all clicked their tongues in admiration. However, this Shadow Doll did not only have a sure kill skill like Life Chain, but it also had a common skill of the Shadow Doll, Shadow Curse. The magic fairy that was marked by Shadow Curse would slowly lose mana, and its defense would greatly decrease. It would also be hated by shadows, and it would take an additional 50% damage when attacked by shadows or other attacks. Basically, the Archmage would use this skill on the target. Stuart Fern did not hesitate and immediately had the shadow doll use shadow curse on the nine-tailed fox. A small shadow doll immediately appeared above the nine-tailed fox's head. Black foam floated on the shadow doll's body, and it let out a silent laugh. The nine-tailed fox suddenly felt uncomfortable all over, and the dark clouds between its eyebrows became denser. The next moment, the shadow curtain on the ground suddenly became restless, and pitch-black shadow energy drilled out like tentacles, crazily grabbing at the nine-tailed fox that was in the air. First, its limbs were grabbed, then it climbed up its body and wrapped around its neck. In the blink of an eye, the nine-tailed fox's body was entangled by these shadow tentacles. Boom! Blue flames instantly erupted. The nine-tailed fox suddenly raised its neck, and the flames around its body burned fiercely, burning the shadow tentacles to ashes. These tentacles did not have much offensive ability, but it was really disgusted. Therefore, after dispersing the tentacles, it did not hesitate to throw out all the ghost fire jades on its tail, blowing up all the remaining shadow crows in the air. Sure enough, none of them were the original body. After releasing the ghost fire jades, the nine-tailed fox suddenly glared at the shadow doll, and a bolt of lightning condensed and shot out quickly. With only a crackling sound, the shadow doll was hit by the fox electric shock, and the entire doll was blown to pieces by the lightning. In the next moment, the life chain between the two sides was activated. The nine-tailed fox's remaining 3,000 magic points dropped by half, and the shadow doll stood up again. However, the petal mark and chain on the nine-tailed fox's body also disappeared. Heh! It sneered slightly, swung its four limbs, and pounced on the shadow doll, like the wind. Seeing that the shadow doll was about to be torn apart, Stuart Phone's next magic card was finally activated. As for Dake Dimming, he was still watching. He now had a total of 5 cards, but these 5 cards were not easy to use. The few magic spirits that could be summoned directly did not have a place to stay for the time being. The moment they were summoned, they would have to suffer the paralysis attack of the black electric current. More importantly, he did not have the means to force the blue square magic ball out of the shadows for the time being. Relying on the nine-tailed fox, he could still temporarily suppress the situation. Let's wait and see. He knew what to do. He was not in a hurry. As for Stuart Phone, who had many means, he was already chanting loudly. In the name of Stuart Phone, I offer the absolute shadow crow and the shadow doll as sacrifices, sacrifice summoning the shadow gravekeeper. When his voice fell, the shadow doll that was about to be killed by the nine-tailed fox on the spot instantly turned into a black light and flew up. In the corner of the field, the absolute shadow crow that was hiding under the shadow curtain also turned into light instantly. 2 black lights soared into the sky, outlining a huge sacrificial summoning array in the blue square summoning area. The shadow gravekeeper, who was covered in a black cloak, slowly emerged from the sacrificial summoning array. At the same time, at the position where the absolute shadow crow turned into black light, the blue square magic ball was also spat out by the shadow curtain. Then, the black electric current quickly gathered and launched an attack on the blue square magic ball. Stuart Phone began to control it after the successful summoning, but the blue square magic ball still suffered nearly 500 points of damage. The health points of the 2 magic balls were once again pulled to the same level. With the appearance of the shadow gravekeeper, the nine-tailed fox that felt the threat suddenly flew back and did not recklessly attack. Its magic power was less than 1,500 points, and the shadow curse on top of its head was still burning its life, causing it to continue to weaken. And if it immediately used its final killing move, Tengu, it would lose its use after that. It could not even be used as a sacrifice. But at this time, Dake Dimming, who had been watching, finally made a move. He whispered to the nine-tailed fox, "Return to the summoning area." The nine-tailed fox was slightly stunned and immediately moved. When it successfully returned to the red square summoning area, Dake Dimming's summoning had just ended. In the name of Dake Dimming, magic summoning, fantasy beast, multiform monster. It was not trash slime. The 3-star fantasy beast, multiform monster, appeared on its back and wriggled its body. Then, after only 3 seconds, Dake immediately used the normal summoning spell and continued to summon. In the name of Dake Dimming, Magic Summoning, Pride 3. Under the illumination of the dark golden light, the fantasy beast, multiform monster's body suddenly swelled, and at the same time, its star level rapidly rose from 3-star to 6-star. The 6-star, fantasy beast, multiform monster, even if it did not use its killing move, transform, had an average of 2,500 points of 3 sizes. But before it could dispel the shadow on the ground, the fantasy beast, multiform monster, could only transform into the shape of a bird and try to fly in the air with its wings to fight. But since Dake chose to summon it, he had a clear purpose. Multiform monster transform, Shadow Gravekeeper. Busy. The fantasy beast, multiform monster, standing on the 9-tailed fox's back immediately used its killing move, transform, after calling out softly. Its gaze was fixed on the Shadow Gravekeeper that was still in the blue team's summoning area, and its entire body underwent a drastic change from the inside out. Seeing this, Stuart Phone's face turned slightly gloomy on the blue team's platform. The Shadow Gravekeeper was a magic elf that he had successfully refined at the end of last semester. With a 6-star panel, it had both dark and ghostly attributes, and it was very compatible with his card deck. Card name, Shadow Gravekeeper. Type, Elf card level. Race, Undying species. Attribute, Dark/Ghostly. Magic power, 2,800. Attack, 2,700. Defense, 1,800. Killing move, Shadow Grave Summon Crowhound. Shadow Curse. The Shadow Gravekeeper's 3 attributes were above average among 6-star magic elves. Although it didn't have any outstanding points, other than its weak defense, its magic power and attack were quite good. However, it wasn't a magic elf that relied on close combat. Its 3 killing moves made it an extremely terrifying existence. However, everything it had was perfectly replicated by the fantasy beast, multiform monster. After the fantasy beast, multiform monster completed its transformation, it jumped down from the 9-tailed fox's back and stood firmly on the ground. The black electric current didn't respond to it. It was obvious that at least magic elves that had shadow or dark energy were not within its detection range. At this moment, the whole scene fell into a delicate balance. The health points of both magic elves were almost the same, and they were both in the air at the same time. 2 identical, Shadow Gravekeepers sat on both sides, and at the same time, they emitted a dark and gloomy aura. The only difference was that there was an additional 9-tailed fox on the red team's side. But this was where the advantage was. Dake didn't hesitate to give the order. Tengu. The 9-tailed fox's magic power had already dropped below half, and there was a chance of failure if he used a sacrifice to summon it. Moreover, he could feel the 9-tailed fox's will roar. The 9-tailed fox's anger had already accumulated in its heart, and the flames all over its body quickly gathered above its head. It had already ignored the shadow curse. It gathered all of its remaining energy and threw out a sure-kill skill called Tengu at the blue team's half. The energy ball emitting terrifying fluctuations quickly shot toward the blue team's side. On the blue team's side, when the 9-tailed fox began to gather flames, Stuart Phone had already given the Shadow Gravekeeper an order. The Shadow Gravekeeper's entire body was covered in a pitch-black cloak, but one could still see that it was tall and big, just that its body was stooped, indicating that it was very old. Its face was covered with a golden mask, and there were only holes where its nose and eyes were. It held a black scepter in its right hand, and there were crow wings at the tip of the scepter. After receiving the Archmage's order, the Shadow Gravekeeper forcefully stomped the scepter in its hand, and the shadow power surged out, quickly merging with the shadow screen on the ground. The ripples instantly spread out at an even faster rate, spreading throughout the entire arena. Then a huge and thick wall suddenly rose from the ground, blocking the terrifying energy ball like a huge shield. After the energy ball hit the high wall, it immediately exploded. Although the high wall was tough, under the terrifying power of Tengu, it instantly shattered like glass. But immediately after, a second and third high wall appeared, connecting with each other without any gaps, weakening the power of the explosion layer by layer. In the end, It barely blocked the aftermath of Tengu. The Shadow Gravekeeper's tall body immediately withered a bit. At the same time, the nine-tailed fox was also killed by the Shadow Curse's continuous damage curse after its magic power ran out. Drip. The second round was finally over. The moment the third round began, Dake gave the same order to the illusionary beast, Multiform, that had transformed into the Shadow Gravekeeper. Thus, the illusionary beast, Multiform, also stomped the scepter, and the same shadow energy merged into the shadow screen, and layers of ripples quickly spread throughout the entire arena. Thick and tall walls rose from the ground, completely changing the terrain of the entire venue. Looking down from above, the entire 100 by 80 arena was separated by layers of high walls. Although it looked like a cemetery, it was more like a maze. The Shadow Tomb was like an extension of the illusionary beast, Multiform's body, and it could clearly explore every corner of the Shadow Tomb. But other than that, the Shadow Tomb did not have any attribute buffs, nor did it have any killing traps. In theory, it was a sure kill skill used to divide the battlefield. Stuart Phone's Shadow Gravekeeper used all the high walls that the Shadow Tomb could create to block the Tengu's explosion. Dake had the advantage of the arena, but the two sides were separated by the Shadow Tomb's high walls, and the situation was temporarily in a stalemate. Both sides took the opportunity to draw their cards. In a magic duel, it was rare to see this type of arena skill. The Shadow Tomb's appearance made the duel arena look like a maze in an underground city. The illusionary beast, Multiform, that had transformed into the Shadow Gravekeeper, was guarding the key point of the maze, waiting for Stuart Phone's magic elf to challenge it. The audience's interest was greatly raised, and there were shouts of surprise one after another. But to Dake, the Shadow Tomb had another meaning. He first looked at the two new magic cards that he had obtained. Diru Beast, Fairy Ibu. At the same time, he obtained two 4-star magic elf cards. Dake frowned slightly. These two magic elf cards were not enough to break the current stalemate. If he did not sacrifice the 6-star illusionary beast, Multiform, he would not even be able to summon the Minas. He picked up the illusionary beast, Multiform, magic card and injected magic power to check the situation after its transformation. Then, Dake's eyes lit up, and he issued an order to the illusionary beast, Multiform. Let's try it, summon the crow dog. Almost at the same time, Stuart Phone on the blue side's platform also issued the same order to his Shadow Gravekeeper. Both sides used their ultimate skill at the same time. Summon the crow dog. The Shadow Gravekeepers, on both sides, stamped their scepters on the ground, and 3 summoning arrays appeared in front of them. Then 2 black dogs and a black crow that were almost identical appeared from the summoning array. The black crow's feathers were shiny, and the edge of its beak was like a blade, and its eyes were extremely sharp. Dake received the feedback from the magic card, and knew that this was a 4-star summoned beast. As for the other 2 black dogs, they were both 3-star summoned beasts. The black crow could fly, scout, and have scarlet eyes. It could exert short-term mental control on weak targets. The black dog had a keen sense of smell, and could sneak into the shadow. It could protect and sneak attack. This was basically the standard of a qualified Shadow Gravekeeper. As magic guiding fairies, the black crow and the 2 black hounds were relatively independent individuals. This meant that they could be used as sacrificial offerings for the summoning. After confirming that the black crow and the black dog could be used as sacrificial offerings, Dake suddenly raised his head, and his gaze happened to meet Stuart Phone's. The two of them stared into each other's eyes, and their lips were moving quickly. In the name of Dake Dimung, a black crow and a black dog are offered as sacrificial offerings. Magic summoning. Minas. In the name of Stuart Phone, a black crow and a black dog are offered as sacrificial offerings. Magic summoning. Shadow Fiend. The duel instantly entered its climax. Both contestants sacrificed at the same time to summon 7-star magic elves of the 3rd tier. Whether it was Dake Dimming or Stuart Phone, they rarely used sacrificial offerings to summon 7-star magic elves. Moreover, the 7-star magic elves that they summoned had never appeared before. As 2 huge sacrificial summoning circles appeared on both sides, the The two 7-star magic elves appeared for the first time. The charming Minas coiled around the high wall, its neck slightly raised, and its bright eyes sparkled. The Shadow Fiend, with black flames around its body, appeared directly in the summoning area of the blue team, and it let out a terrifying roar. The high wall of the Shadow Graveyard became a cushion, ensuring that the Minas would not be paralyzed by the black electric current the moment it landed on the ground, even if the paralysis effect might be weak. However, this high and mighty attitude made it seem even more noble. Just because of its appearance, the cheers of the audience suddenly increased by a lot. Countless people were attracted by its charm, and the whole audience's eyes seemed to be focused on it. As for the Shadow Fiend, that emitted the domineering aura of a king, it was completely ignored. Even Stuart Phone, who was on the blue team's platform, was distracted for a moment because he was fully focused on the Minas. Only when the Shadow Fiend's roar entered his ears did he suddenly wake up, and he immediately ordered the two magic elves to attack. Although the Shadow Graveyard on the field was not created by his Shadow Gravekeeper, it could be used as a protective barrier for the magic ball if it was used cleverly. Therefore, Stuart Phone made a prompt decision to launch an all-out attack. With the strength of the 6-star and 7-star magic elves, it was not difficult to climb the high wall. However, Stuart Phone obviously would not give up this geographical advantage. Under his command, the Shadow Gravekeeper and the Shadow Fiend rushed into the maze. The Shadow Gravekeeper's movement speed was relatively slow, but the remaining black dog was extremely fast. The Shadow Fiend followed closely behind the black dog, and every step it took left a black burn mark behind its feet. Card name, Shadow Fiend. Type, Elf card. Level, Race Fiend. Attribute, Dark. Magic power, 3200. Attack, 3200. Defense, 2200. Ultimate skill, Latent Shadow Ripple. Wailing of Spirits. Shadow Descent. The Shadow Fiend was born in a human form, and it was more than 2 meters tall. Its body overflowed with energy like flames. Stuart Phone did not have many high-level magic elven cards, and this 7-star Shadow Fiend was already one of the more powerful cards he had. After ordering the Shadow Fiend to attack, Stuart Phone did not stop. He pulled out one of the few cards he had left in his hand and silently chanted a summon. In the red half of the zone, the Minas sat cross-legged on the wall and released the Moon's Guard immediately. The moonlight that was extremely faint outside the bright room gradually sprinkled down with its soft cry, embellishing the shadow curtain with a few spots of light. About half of the red half of the zone was within the range of the moonlight. Although the shadow energy on the ground was not purified and expelled, the air was already filled with the power of the moon. Under the effect of the Moon's Guard, this half of the red half of the zone entered the Moon's Guard state. The entire environment had changed. However, the Minas glanced at the ground and did not have any intention of going down. The pitch-black shadow curtain made it feel very resistant. On the red side's platform, Dake decisively started a new round of summoning. He summoned Kettle Kettle. When Kettle Kettle appeared on the ground of the red side's summoning zone, the black electric currents hidden in the shadows instantly gathered. However, the moment the black electric currents were about to take effect, they were blocked by the Moon's Guard. A faint layer of light enveloped Kettle Kettle's body, preventing the numbing effect from invading. Kettle Kettle looked at the black electric currents curiously and raised its tentacles to sweep them off one by one. These electric currents scattered and gathered together like small fish. It was quite interesting. After confirming that the Moon's Guard could block the black electric currents, Dake was truly relieved. Then he gave the order to defend and chose to wait. The path in the maze was winding. The Shadow Gravekeeper and the Shadow Fiend took a few turns after entering the maze to buy some time. When they finally arrived in front of the final boss, Fantasy Beast, ever-changing monster, it was already the next round. Battle Stage 4. 30s. The players from both sides calmly drew their cards. It's here. Stuart Phone suddenly raised his head, and the corners of his mouth that had been tense finally curled up. Since he dared to challenge Dake Dimming, of course he had a way to win. And the magic card in his hand was the key. At this time, his two magic elves had already entered the Fantasy Beast ever-changing monster's vision. The first head-on battle since the start of the duel had begun. The first to attack was the Shadow Fiend, who had an extremely strong desire to attack. Its body sank into the shadows the moment it stepped out, leaving only ripples on the surface of the shadows. The ripples moved at high speed, and in the blink of an eye, it sneaked under the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster. The Shadow Gravekeeper, who was one step behind, immediately activated its ultimate skill, Black Curse Death. The moment it saw Kiran, it suddenly raised its scepter, and its hunched back suddenly straightened. The eyes under the golden mask emitted a scarlet bloodlight. Then a little black appeared in the sky where the tip of the scepter was pointing. The black dot spread forward at a terrifying speed. In the blink of an eye, the black dot turned into a black curtain that covered the entire sky. A strong killing intent suddenly appeared from the black curtain. In the sky and on the ground, the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster, was only a moment slower and was surrounded by attacks from both sides. The Shadow Gravekeeper and the Shadow Fiend ignored the kettle that was close at hand and only attacked it. With the current state of the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster, it was impossible to dodge. Once both attacks hit, it would be killed on the spot. There was no way to escape. At this critical moment, the ignored kettle suddenly let out a cry. Its eyes burst out with a white light that symbolized superpower. It was released at this moment. The Shadow Fiend was moving underground and could not be targeted. Its target could only be the Shadow Gravekeeper. Ultimate skill. Equal sharing of strength. The Shadow Gravekeeper's attack power was as high as 2,700 points. After the paste's attack power was added and divided equally, it became 1,350 points in an instant. And this 1,350 points of attack power, even if it was enhanced by the ultimate skill, could not shake the 1,800 points of defense. The killing intent that burst out from the black curtain above its head suddenly turned into a soft massage. And the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster, only had to face the latent shadow ripple that was released from the shadows. The ripples released by the Shadow Fiend were like countless blades that strangled the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster. After it released the ultimate skill, it had about 2,000 points of magic left, and it plummeted. Seeing that the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster's magic was about to reach zero, it was a little slow. A stream of water rich in vitality swept over and instantly wrapped around the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster's body. Under the effect of the life stream's magic was instantly increased by a quarter of its maximum magic power. The sudden 625 points of magic power was crucial, and it helped the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster, survive the Shadow Fiend's first round of strangulation. When the Shadow Fiend came out of the shadows and wanted to turn around and stab it again, the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster, suddenly raised its scepter and released the last of its magic power. Just like the Shadow Gravekeeper, the cursed Shadow Fiend pounced on the Shadow Gravekeeper's body. The Shadow Gravekeeper used its remaining magic power to resist the cursed Shadow Fiend. Its magic power, which was already not much because of the nine-tailed fox's Tengu, was immediately reduced to a freezing point. After the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster, released all three of its ultimate skills, it actually deactivated transformation on the spot and relied on its suddenly shrunk body to narrowly dodge the Shadow Fiend's second round of attacks. After deactivating transformation, the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster, not only shrunk in size, but its defense also increased from 1,800 to 2,500. Although this small increase in defense still couldn't help it withstand the Shadow Fiend's next attack, it didn't matter. Hurry! Kettle's eyes flashed with a sharp light, and it released the remaining two ultimate skills, Strength Trick and Defense Split. Strength Trick allowed it to swap its own attack and defense. Its attack, which had returned to zero, became 2,200 points after it was swapped with its defense, and its defense became 0 points. Defense Split allowed it to share its defense with the Shadow Fiend in a friendly manner. At that moment, the Shadow Fiend's defense fell by half, leaving it with a pitiful 1,100 points. The fantasy beast, ever-changing monster, immediately threw a heavy punch at the Shadow Fiend. The Shadow Fiend's rubber fist, with an attack of 2,500, hit the Shadow Fiend's face directly when it didn't expect to be counterattacked. The friendly face fiend's magic power decreased by 1,000 points. More importantly, this punch had completely attracted the Shadow Fiend's attention. The Shadow Fiend, with an intelligence level of 2.0, was hit by the water cannon that fell from the sky before Stuart Phone could give the order in time. There was no doubt that its remaining 2,000 points of magic power couldn't withstand the terrifying power of the water cannon. At that moment, the Shadow Fiend was like a flame that was extinguished by a flood of water, and it turned into ashes on the spot. A 7-star magic elf was so aggrieved that it couldn't even release its remaining 2 ultimate skills before it was destroyed. On the red team's platform, Dake Diming's expression was cold. He had 2 new magic cards in his hand. Bronze Snake Lens, Fantasy Beast, Ibu. After the Minas released the water cannon, it couldn't move, so he didn't hesitate to summon the Fantasy Beast, Ibu. It had a total of 3 Fantasy Beast, Ibu cards in its deck. As long as it drew any one of the Fantasy Beast, Ibu cards, it could use the ultimate skill Catch to replace the other 2 Fantasy Beast, Ibu cards. Ibu use Wish on the changeable monster, then use Catch. Squeak. Illusory Beast. Ivan quickly executed the order. After using Wish on Illusory Beast, ever-changing monster, it immediately used Receive to summon a second Illusory Beast, Ivan. It returned to Dake's hand. The second Fantasy Beast, Ibu, also used Wish on the Fantasy Beast, changeable monster, and then used Catch again. Dake's hand smoothly had 2 Fantasy Beast, Ibu cards, and there was still 1 Fantasy Beast, Ibu, standing in the middle of the field. After this series of actions, his hand didn't decrease but instead increased. Finally, use Wish on the Minas, then use Catch. First Dragon Egg. Using Fantasy Beast, Ibu to replace the Dragon Egg had become a common tactic in Dake Dimung. The last Fantasy Beast, Ibu, returned to its hand after using Wish on the Minas, that was almost at full strength. In its original position, there was now a shining Dragon Egg. The duel had entered the Dake Diming's unique rhythm. However, Stuart Phone didn't just sit there and wait for death. He had already buried a magic card in the 3rd round. The sacrifice of Shadow Fiend wasn't in vain. It could even be said that it wasn't sacrificed at all. Stuart Phone wasn't a reckless person who would allow his magic fairy to charge out recklessly. The reason he did so was because he wanted to try and end the duel. On the other hand, he was prepared to use it to obtain a skill if his attempt failed. Under normal circumstances, the more powerful a magic fairy's ultimate skill was, the longer its cooldown. A skill that could kill a 7-star magic fairy was basically impossible to use twice in the same duel. Stuart Phone had indeed gained something. At least he had successfully swindled the Minas' water cannon and rendered it immobile for 30 seconds. As for the Shadow Guardian that was buried with it, after it used Shadow Tomb to block the 9-tailed fox, Stingu, it was no longer of any value. Stuart Phone quietly activated the magic card that he had buried in advance. At the corner of the blue summoning area, a palm-sized box quietly opened. A miniature Shadow Fiend crawled out from the box and gradually returned to its original size. Mystic Ritual Card. Phylactery. Before the magic fairy's death, its data would be recorded in the phylactery. When it died, it would be reborn in the phylactery. Although the phylactery could only last for 3 minutes, it was just right to use in a magic duel. Stuart Phone spent more than half a year to successfully make 2 magic cards, one of which was the secret ritual card called the phylactery. The second one was the phylactery card that he currently had. Vessel of the Dead. When the Vessel of the Dead was activated, every death of a magic fairy that possessed the power of shadow or shadow would become the Vessel of the Dead's nourishment, making it stronger. In order to collect the core materials for crafting the Vessel of the Dead, Stuart Phone had a narrow escape. After that adventure, He lay on a cold boulder and looked up at the cold moon. He was even in a daze and wondered what was the point of setting his goal as becoming a noble. Although there was a class barrier between the nobles and the commoners, the status of a magus was rising with the pace of the times. Even if he did not become a noble, he could still become an excellent magus and enjoy treatment that was not inferior to the nobles. Therefore, becoming a noble did not mean as much to him as he had imagined. But later on he thought it through. He just wanted to fulfill his father's wish. For the commoners of the previous generation, becoming a noble with hereditary qualifications was something that brought honor to their ancestors. His father relied on his military exploits to become a noble, without hereditary qualifications. He was only one step away from his lifelong wish, but this step was like a moat lying in front of him. After the war ended, Old Phone lost his ability to work due to the injuries left behind by the war. He spent his days drinking with the money distributed by his superiors. He was so dispirited that he became a different person. When he was a child, whenever he saw his father off to the battlefield, he would feel that his father's back was as broad as the earth and his father's shoulders were as steady as a mountain. He did not wish for his father to continue being dispirited. He wanted to become a noble with hereditary qualifications. He just wanted his father to stand up again and become the father that he needed to look up to. He did not have any big ambitions. That was all. In the name of Stuart Phone, I summoned the vessel of the dead. Stuart Phone did not hide anything and summoned the vessel of the dead. The presence of the vessel of the dead could not be hidden at all. He directly summoned the vessel of the dead from the blue side summoning zone. It was a gathering of shadow energy, a special tool in the shape of a spindle. After the vessel of the dead was summoned, a cold and sharp light pierced out from its mouth and burst out towards the sky. The cold light that was constantly swallowing and spitting out attracted the attention of everyone. The upperclassmen in the ring widened their eyes one after another. Even the professors who happened to be there were shocked. Angus Jeffrey, who had been staring at the scene, suddenly showed an extremely shocked expression. He only treated Stuart Phone as a chess piece that could be discarded at any time. In the end, Stuart Phone's request was too simple for him. All he needed to do was to give him a position as a noble when he discarded him, and everything would be settled. This was the class barrier. After the war ended, the door to the promotion of commoners to nobles was closed. Not willing to sacrifice during the war, but after the war, wanting to become a noble without any sacrifice. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Therefore, it was more than 10 times harder to become a noble now than before. But Angus Jeffrey's father was one of the 36 counselors, so he had that privilege. Anyway, Stuart Phone's request was not high, right? But now he suddenly realized that he seemed to have to reevaluate the value of this chess piece. In the current situation where his previous fans were all superficial in appearance, Stuart Phone's importance had undoubtedly risen again. Stuart Phone did not expect that his performance would attract attention that he did not want. He hurriedly summoned the vessel of the dead before the shadow gravekeeper was completely destroyed and then quickly drew the cards. Yes, the 5th round had arrived. This duel was generally decided within 10 rounds, and half of it had already passed. The players in both hands drew new magic cards from the top of the deck without hesitation. When they saw the 2 new magic cards, there was a dragon's roar in the red side's summoning zone. The valiant and high-spirited, young blue-eyed dragon broke out from the enormous dragon egg. As the eggshell dissipated, it suddenly flapped its wings and flew high, then landed on the high wall near the Minas Hall of Light. Dake Dimming quickly reminded and looked down at the cards in his hand. Bliss 3 Moon, Hawkman Wrestling. After obtaining 3 Bliss 3 Moon cards, Dake put them all into the deck. This also slightly increased the probability of drawing Bliss 3 Moon. But in fact, no matter which Great Sin card he drew, as long as it was level 3 or above, it would not be a problem. Therefore he now had 3 Illusory Beast, Ibu cards in his hand. Roar! The blue-eyed dragon whelp was always so energetic. It followed Dake's orders and suddenly spread its wings. From the suddenly extended dragon wings, there was a burst of dazzling white light. The white light gathered into a ball in the sky, emitting a bright light like the sun. Visible to the naked eye, There were snow-white wings that looked like the feathers of an angel floating down from the sky. The ball of light suddenly exploded, finally dispersing the shadows on the ground. The darkness retreated, and the light attacked. The blue-eyed dragon whelp's hall of light quickly turned more than half of the field into its home ground. However, it raised its eyebrows and stared at the shadow gravekeeper that only had a little bit of HP left. Although they were both 6-star magical spirits, the shadow gravekeeper's stats were far from the blue-eyed dragon whelp. With all of its killing skills on cooldown, it was no match for the blue-eyed dragon whelp. But before it could retreat, the blue-eyed dragon whelp excitedly swooped down and harvested its remaining HP. Woof 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 woof. The black dog summoned by the shadow gravekeeper was wrestling with the black dog summoned by the illusory beast, ever-changing monster. The blue-eyed dragon whelp turned its head and looked at them curiously like a baby. Because it could not tell which side was which, it did not attack. But at the place where the shadow gravekeeper's body disappeared, the magic that was supposed to dissipate suddenly gathered, and then flew to the blue side without any warning, and was absorbed by the spirit vessel. The blue-eyed dragon whelp suddenly woke up and bared its fangs at the spirit vessel. Tools like this were not rare, but this spirit vessel gave it a bad feeling. On the red side's platform, Dake also felt the threat of the spirit vessel. But he still summoned illusory beast, Ibu again. Naturally, this was the one that had intelligence. A tool that can absorb the power of a magical spirit after death? Releasing it so obviously, aren't you afraid that I will target it and attack it? Dake thought for a while and said to the blue-eyed dragon whelp, "Destroy it." The blue-eyed dragon whelp responded and jumped from the high wall, shooting out at high speed. In its vision, the blue side was already defenseless. Destroying the tool first, and then chasing after the magical ball would allow it to smoothly win this match. But when it flew close, the shadow devil, that was burning with black flames, suddenly jumped onto the high wall, opened its huge mouth and howled at it. Sure kill skill, spirit whale. The blue-eyed dragon whelp's forward momentum was suddenly stopped, and its body that had no place to exert force was actually blown away. It hurriedly increased its speed and flapped its wings to stabilize its body, but after completely enduring the damage of the spirit whale, its magic power dropped rapidly, and at the same time that the shadow devil howled, countless pale white spirits were spat out from its mouth along with the sound waves. These spirits gathered into a pile and flew towards the blue-eyed dragon whelp, with the wind clinging onto its body as if they wanted to suck its blood. The blue-eyed dragon whelp felt its magic power continue to drop, and actually let out a long cry on the spot. That cry was sweet and sorrowful, completely different from its usual cry. It was the sure kill skill. Young dragon's call. Of course, without a second blue-eyed white dragon, its call was of no use. And when it was entangled by the spirits, the shadow devil suddenly stomped its feet, and under the driving force of the reaction force, its sandbag-sized fist fiercely hammered towards the blue-eyed dragon whelp, with a huge force. The blue-eyed dragon whelp suddenly shut its mouth, and its claws quickly stretched out, grabbing onto the shadow devil's fist as if it was taking something out of its bag. Then it pulled and twisted, curled up its body, and struck out with its elbow. Bang! The shadow devil's strength was stripped away, and its chest suffered a heavy blow, and it instantly let out a painful cry. The blue-eyed dragon whelp was unforgiving after gaining the upper hand, and immediately endured the spirit whale's spirit whale, and used a series of attacks that it had been familiar with until now on the shadow devil. A dignified 7-star magic guide fairy was actually being beaten up by a 6-star magic guide fairy. Fortunately, the shadow devil did not have intelligence, or else it would have been humiliated to an unimaginable extent. At the same time, both contestants did not stop their summoning. In this duel, Dake Dimming activated the second, Extreme Bliss 3, Moon, directing the light of Extreme Bliss towards Illusory Beast, Ivan, who was standing on the wall. Illusory Beast, Ivan raised its head, and the light of Extreme Bliss gathered on its forehead, forming the Extreme Bliss emblem. Then, a pink haze of moonlight was released from its forehead, surrounding its petite body. When the light of evolution gradually disappeared, the pitch-black furred and pink-patterned, illusory beast, Moon Ivan stood upright. Moon Ivan, which evolved from Extreme Bliss 3 Moon, had a terrifying defense of 3,500 points, and the 4 sure kill skills of Moonlight, Evil Wave, Black Vision, and Deception. Its 3 stats were extremely terrifying, and the combination of these 3 attributes was even higher than that of an average 7-star magic guide fairy. After successfully evolving Illusory Beast, Moon Ivan leapt from the high wall, rushing towards the blue side's half. Its goal was clear, and that was to shatter the spirit whale as quickly as possible. However, in the blue side's summoning area, Stuart Phone also summoned a new magic guide fairy. It was a shadow monster with the appearance of a minotaur. Shadow Magic Bull. Card name, Shadow Magic Bull. Type Fairy card. Level, *****. Race, Bird Beast. Attribute Dark. Magic Power, 1500 Attack, 1500 Defense, 1400 Sure Kill Skills. Hidden Shadow Enrage. As a Shadow Series magic guide fairy with almost all 3 stats, the Shadow Magic Bull only had 2 sure kill skills. One of them was Hidden Shadow, which was commonly mastered by shadow creatures, and the other was the embodiment of its value. Enrage. Enrage was a taunt skill. Although it only had a single target effect, it could provoke the target's anger, causing it to pursue the Shadow Magic Bull relentlessly until it regained consciousness. The Shadow Magic Bull's existence was to protect the spirit whale. After Stuart Phone summoned it, he immediately gave the order. Look at your opponent and draw the aggro of that black illusory beast. Moo. After the Shadow Magic Bull responded, it climbed up the high wall, pulled out its giant axe, and stared at the charging illusory beast, Moon Ivan, with a solemn expression. Moon. Moon Ivan let out a cry, releasing Evil Wave as it ran. The terrifying wave filled with evil aura instantly exploded, not only blasting towards the Shadow Magic Bull, but also towards the Shadow Magic and Cyanide Dragon. The Shadow Magic Bull stood on the wall, without any shadows to hide in, and was immediately affected, almost spitting out blood. Moo. At that moment, it let out an even deeper roar, still releasing its sure kill skill Enrage towards Illusory Beast, Moon Ivan, as if it was afraid that Illusory Beast, Moon Ivan, wouldn't kill it. That was indeed the case. For the Minotaur in the shadows, only death was salvation. When Illusory Beast, Moon Ivan, was provoked by Enrage and changed its route, Stuart Phone once again summoned a new magic guide fairy. It was a giant pot nearly 2 meters tall. The color of this giant pot was deathly white, and the ceramic pot was engraved with black ghost totems. 2 poisonous snakes were twisted into vines, forming the pot's ears. This mere 3-star magic guide fairy was like the mouth of an abyss, releasing a terrifying aura. Dake had a very deep impression of this magic guide fairy, and clearly knew that it could summon magic guide fairies of the same race and element by devouring spirit and darkness energy, but not higher than itself by 1 rank. Card name, Ghostvine Pot. Type, Fairy card. Level, ******. Race Undying. Element, Spirit/Darkness. Magic Power, 1600 Attack, 0 Defense, 100 Sure Kill Skill. Ghost in Pot. During the Easter Duel Festival, Stuart Phone had used the Jar of Ghost Vines to summon the 6-star Great Python known as the Ghost King in Jar. Devour, howl, and then be born. Ghost in Pot. Stuart Phone opened his arms and shouted with a stern look in his eyes. The Ghostvine Pot only had 100 points of defense, and it would be easily shattered by normal summoning. However, in this situation, it would be a win if it was shattered, and it would still be a win if it wasn't shattered. Whoosh! The Ghostvine Pot's lid opened automatically, revealing a pitch-black interior that was as deep as an abyss. A huge suction force was generated from the pot, sucking in the remaining shadows of the blue side and the storm. Apart from that, even the high walls formed by the Shadow Tomb were being devoured, and the nearby walls kept thinning, the energy index dropping rapidly. A pitch-black whirlpool formed at the mouth of the Ghostvine Pot, and a ghostly wail was heard from within. The 5th round was coming to an end. The wish that Illusory Beast Ivan released before receive took effect. Illusory Beast Ever-changing beast. S status was fully recovered under the stacking of 2 wishes. Minas. S magic power was also fully replenished. The Z water cannon. S hard hit status was also successfully removed. Dake summoned Hawkman Wrestling and ordered it to attack the blue magic conducting ball. Hawkman Wrestling spread its wings and flew towards the blue magic conducting ball. Fantasy Beast, ever-changing monster, transformed into Menus' appearance and climbed up the high wall with it. Then they charged towards the blue side. Tick. Battle Stage 6. 30s. The countdown for the 6th round began instantly. The players with both hands quickly drew their cards. Dake couldn't stop the Ghost Vine Pot's special summoning. From within the Ghost Vine Pot, a ghost-like shriek was heard, and a pitch-black giant python drilled out. When it stood up, it was taller than the wall, and its snake eyes emitted a cold and ferocious light. It was the 6-star magic fairy, Ghost King in Pot. Both players used their trump cards, and this duel reached its climax. Card name, Ghost King in Pot. Type, Fairy card. Level. Race, Undying Species. Attribute, Ghost/Dark Element. Magic power, 2600. Attack, 2800. Defense, 1700. Ultimate skills. Seal in Pot. Pot of Sealing. Ghost Snake Carnival. Ghost King in Pot had huge skin folds behind its neck, and the tip of its tail was illusory like a ghost. It suddenly shrieked and released its ultimate skill. Ghost Snake Carnival. Summoning dozens of ghost snakes. 16,000 words. 8 chapters. Looking for monthly votes. It's the last 2 days. If you don't vote, the monthly votes will expire. Could it be that the dark age where you can't even get 16,000 votes per day is finally here? Angle for all. Then there's no choice. I'll have to wake up and do it again. Also, for the year-end Reader Appreciation Program, don't forget to sign up if you haven't signed up yet. After signing up, if you subscribe from the 1st to the 5th of January, you'll get a 10% discount. That's like a 10% discount for the entire book. Chapter 690. In the sky, the horn-throwing Hawkman was flying towards the blue cube magic ball. On the high wall, the Shadow Demon was being beaten to the ground by the young Blue Eyes Dragon. The Shadow Demon Bull was almost instantly killed by the magical beast, Moonibu. The Menus and magical beast, ever-changing monster, split into 2 and swam towards the blue half. On the ground, the pot of ghost vines was waiting for its second summoning chance. The dozens of ghost snakes summoned by the Ghost King in Pot quickly climbed up the wall and swarmed towards the young Blue Eyes Dragon and magical beast, Moonibu. The other 2 black hounds were still fighting, and the pot of ghost vines was watching the show. As for the Ghost King in Pot itself, it had already swam up the high wall and scanned the battlefield coldly. Among its 3 ultimate skills, the Seal in Pot was a self-imposed passive skill. Although the Ghost Snake Frenzy was very useful at certain times, it could only be used to harass in a high-intensity battle. Thus, only the last sealing skill was left, the Pot of Sealing. However, Stuart Phone's true goal was to ensure that the vessel of Souls wasn't destroyed in advance, allowing the rest of the elves to die in a very natural manner. However, how to die was also a skill. It couldn't be sent too quickly or too slowly. If it was sent too quickly, the spirit vessel wouldn't mature and would fail on the verge of success. If it was sent too slowly, the spirit vessel wouldn't be able to absorb the shadow energy of the dead magic elves, and wouldn't be able to grow. Thus, how to choose an opponent to seal was a very difficult thing to choose. Stuart Phone quickly commanded his magic elves. At the same time, he extended his right hand and released magic to control the magic ball, causing the blue magic ball to quickly descend and return to the back of the Ghost King in Pot. Website: https://m. Vipcanchu. VIP. The Horned Hawkman was only a very normal 3-star magic elf. It was impossible for it to break through the Ghost King in Pot. Stuart Phone was very clear about this. He raised his gaze slightly and looked at the battle stage countdown on the projection. Time passed very quickly. The 5th round was about to end in the blink of an eye. Shadow Demon turn into a shadow. Shadow Descent. Stuart Phone's voice suddenly rose, and the shadow devil that was being beaten up by the young green-eyed dragon suddenly emitted an unusual aura. It abruptly flipped over from the ground and roared at the cyanide baby dragon that was looking down from above. The shadow energy gathered in its body jumped like flames and shot up into the sky. The beam of black light converged into a line. After shooting to a certain height, it rapidly expanded in all directions. The thin line actually became as thick as a wrist, then as thick as a water bucket. It became thicker and thicker, and in the blink of an eye, it expanded to a diameter of 3 to 4 meters, forming a huge black pillar. The shadow demon stood in this huge pillar of light, opened its arms, raised its head and roared. Its ferocious aura soared into the sky. In the first attack, it didn't use this ultimate killing move. Now it was finally successfully released under Stuart Phone's command. Its body began to expand crazily within the black pillar of light. Black horns grew out of its shoulders and both sides of its head. Its back swelled into a peak and suddenly burst open. A pair of demonic wings actually broke through its skin and flesh, furiously spreading out. After completing its transformation, the shadow demon fiercely flapped its wings, and its entire body soared upwards. Its arms became extremely thick, its muscles swelled and firm, and its claws were as sharp as knives. And on its interface, whether it was defense or attack, both had an unprecedented surge. The audience outside the arena suddenly went into an uproar. The shadow demon was a relatively high-ranking race within the demon race. Their ranking was second only to the vampire. Although they didn't attract attention because they always lurked in the shadows, they caused terrifying casualties to humans during war. Among them, there was an extremely small portion that had the transformation talent. They could summon the shadow energy to descend in times of danger, and temporarily transform into a stronger demon. And among the magic spirits, the shadow demon that had the ultimate skill, shadow descent, was also extremely rare. This transformation finally caused the shadow demon S3 sizes to surpass the 6-star magical fantasy beast, Moon. It truly had the strength of a third-rank magic spirit. It flapped its wings and flew high, abruptly rushing towards the young cyanide dragon, wanting to take revenge. But when it finally rushed in front of the young cyanide dragon, it discovered that the cyanide dragon had a ferocious expression on its face, and the flames of fury rising from its eyes seemed to have materialized. Ultimate skill, Dragon's reverse scale. It was just a transformation. Who didn't know that? The young cyanide dragon, as fury rose to the limit. Its entire body surged with a chaotic white light, and its attack that was originally as high as 3,000 points received a huge increase of 50% to 100%. But at that moment, its rationality was also disconnected, and it instinctively attacked the creature closest to it, the shadow demon, which happened to collide with it. And before that, the magical fantasy beast, Moon that had been successfully enraged by the shadow demon bull, pounced towards it and used a fierce meow to dig out the heart, instantly killing this tall minotaur. After that, the magical fantasy beast, Moon was stunned on the spot for a few seconds, before abruptly waking up and noticing the dozens of ghost snakes surrounding it. Of course, these ghost snakes could not cause any harm to it. It completely ignored them, and looked towards the ghost king in urns, behind the ghost snakes. That ghost king in urns felt threatened, and suddenly turned its head, its scarlet snake eyes staring at the petite but abnormally strong, magical fantasy beast, Moon. It suddenly realized that this black cat that was also a 6-star was an extremely terrifying enemy. And almost at the same time, Stuart Phone on the blue team's platform also made a decision. Ghost King in urns, use the sealing jar on it. The sealing jar was the Ghost King in urns, a core ultimate skill. After being sealed by it, not only would the magic fairy be locked in the jar, its consciousness would also be suppressed, its magic power would be sucked away, and it would rapidly lose the ability to resist. Magic fairies of the same level, unless they had a counter ability, would not be able to break free once they were sealed by the sealing jar. During the Easter Duel Festival, the Ghost King in urns, sealing jar, had mistakenly shot magical fantasy beast, Sun, and as a result it had been miserably reflected, and it had been locked in the jar. But this time, it would not make the same mistake again. Currently, among Dake's magic fairies, the young cyanide dragon had activated Dragon's reverse scale. Although it had stalled the Shadow Fiend, it had also fallen into a state of confusion, and its threat had decreased. Minas had already used 3 ultimate skills since the start of the competition, and only one was left. Magical Fantasy Beast, ever-changing monster, after transformation had been removed, was just a facade. Hawkman Wrestling was not mentioned. If that was the case, the only one that truly posed a huge threat to the spirit vessel was Magical Fantasy Beast, Moon Ibu. As long as it was sealed, Dake Diming's offensive power would be greatly reduced. Stuart Phone had seen through the situation in an extremely short amount of time. After he made this command, he immediately placed his hand on top of the deck, and was prepared to wait for the moment when the round changed to draw a card. He wanted to seize every second to win. On the red team's platform, although Dake was surprised by the Shadow Fiend's transformation, he still had some understanding of the sealing jar, of the Ghost King and urns. Thus, when Stuart Phone made his decision, he also gave the Magical Fantasy Beast, Moon Ibu, a timely order. Moon Ibu, use Black Vision on it. The moment the 2 magic fairies' gazes met, they both used their ultimate skills after hearing the orders of their respective magisters. The Ghost King in urns suddenly raised its ghostly tail, and the tip of its tail quickly lit up with a black light. A faintly discernible black jar quickly condensed within the swaying black light. A gloomy and sinister aura instantly erupted. When the black jar finally condensed, it suddenly swung its tail, preparing to throw the black jar at the Magical Fantasy Beast, Moon Ibu. Once this black jar was thrown, a black pillar of light would shoot out from the jar's mouth, enveloping the Magical Fantasy Beast, Moon Ibu. But this series of preparatory actions was really too many and too complicated. But the Magical Fantasy Beast, Moon Ibu's Black Vision Bliss, only needed to glare. That pair of amber eyes emitted a magnificent color, becoming captivating to the soul. The Ghost King in urns had just made its move when it was glared at by Black Vision. Then, within its patience, a conflicting feeling of joy and fear quickly rose. Its huge body was enveloped by the black light, and it was unable to move. The 2 6-star magic fairies froze there, one moving, the other moving. On the blue team's platform, Stuart Phone's expression suddenly changed. The Magical Fantasy Beast, Moon Ibu's Black Vision Bliss, had taken control of the Ghost King in urns first. In this way, it was equivalent to 1-for-1. It was a huge difference from what he had expected. Because of this, he had lost the cards to resist the Minas and the Magical Fantasy Beast, ever-changing monster. In his field, the only ones left that could move were the pot of ghost vines, in an empty state, and the 3-star Black Hound. Sensing that the situation was getting worse, Stuart Phone hurriedly looked at the 2 magic cards that he had just received. If these 2 magic cards could not stall for time, then he could only activate the Vessel of the Dead in advance. No, fate did not seem to favor him this time. Among the 2 magic cards that he had just received, there was no magic fairy card. If it was a 6-star magic fairy card, he could immediately perform the sacrificial summoning. But it was not. In the name of Stuart Phone, I summon the Shadow Maze. Under such urgency, Stuart Phone could only resort to this helplessness, and used one of the magic spell cards with special effects. This magic spell card, called the Shadow Maze, was also his usual method, but now that there was the Hall of Light in the field, its attributes clashed, and the final effect might not be ideal. But he could only pin his hopes on it. At that moment, a pitch-black light shot out from the Shadow Maze card. The pitch-black light turned into a curtain and swept across the field like a cape. A shadow descended. This Shadow Maze could not only block vision, but it could also provide energy for the pot of ghost vines. It was a pity that Stuart Phone did not have any high-star magic fairy cards in his hand, so he would not be able to pass the 6th round smoothly. The dark curtain created by the Shadow Maze was affected by the Hall of Light, and the white light was extremely thin, but it could not block vision. This move of his was obviously useless. On the red team's platform, Dake had also received a new magic card. Pride. War horn, pride. S appearance gave Kieran a backbone. It's a pity that it's not the blissful black moon, so I can't test the power of the blissful black moon in this duel. Of course, he did not have a magic fairy card that could evolve the blissful black moon to the 3rd tier. Even if he really got the blissful black moon, it could only evolve into a fantasy beast, Moonibu. Therefore this pride was the best choice. His luck was not bad. As long as he summoned the trash slime and offered it with the remaining black hound or kettle as a sacrifice, he would be able to summon the Diru beast. The duel after that would be the stage of the fairy beast. Stuart Phone's magic guide fairies were all of the dark element. Even if he tried his best, he wouldn't be a match for the fairy beast, unless he had a trump card that could defeat the fairy beast. However, Dake did not think that there was such a possibility. He watched as Stuart Phone activated Heavy Shadows, and watched as the curtain of Heavy Shadows was dispersed by the Hall of Light. Then he looked up at the other side. Menace and Fantasy Beast, ever-changing monster, were approaching the spirit vessel. Hawkman, who was ignored by Stuart Phone, pounced towards the blue magic ball again. Stuart Phone could no longer hide his nervousness. This duel had reached its end. Stuart Phone had made several outstanding performances, and had surprised him many times in the course of the duels. As a 4th-year student who lacked the support of resources, he had already done very well. Dake thought as he summoned the trash slime, with a flick of his finger, and then sacrificed the Diru beast. In the name of Dake Dimming, I offer the trash slime and black hound as sacrifices to summon the Diru beast. The white cat that the audience was familiar with appeared from the sacrificial summoning circle and landed steadily on the high wall of the red summoning area. It bent its knees and squatted down, observing the surroundings. Its gaze sharpened and instantly noticed the spirit vessel that was floating in midair. Menace and Fantasy Beast, ever-changing monster, had surrounded the spirit vessel from both sides. Menace quickly swam to the spirit vessel. It raised its tail and whipped the spirit vessel viciously. Shadow Entanglement. Stuart Phone slapped down another magic card. After the Shadow Entanglement spell card was activated, it led the shadow force in the air to condense into countless tentacles and tightly entangled the Menace's huge body. Meow. The Menace's face showed a slightly disgusted expression. The mana on its body exploded, and the life water current that was revolving around its body started to spin under its control and suddenly spread out. The tentacles that were condensed by the shadow force were washed away by the water current, turning back into black mist and quickly dissipating. Then, Fantasy Beast, ever-changing monster, struck first, raising its tail and whipping the spirit vessel's body heavily. Bang! The spindle-shaped special vessel made a buzzing sound, and the sharp light that shot out from its mouth swayed. However, it was not shattered by the attack. The death of the Shadow Gravekeeper and the Shadow Demon Bull had strengthened it to a certain extent, and its outer surface was very hard. Roar! The Shadow Demon's angry roar was heard. Under Stuart Phone's forceful command, it finally broke free from the young green-eyed dragon's violent attack at the cost of suffering a dragon claw. It then rushed over in a frenzy. Fantasy Beast, ever-changing monster, was about to launch a second round of attack on the spirit vessel, when it suddenly realized that the light above its head was blocked. The shadow demon descended from the sky, its sharp giant claws viciously grabbing at its head. Busy. It let out a scream, and its body suddenly transformed from the Mina form into the appearance of the Griffin wrestler. Under this kind of ordinary transformation, it could not inherit the Griffin wrestler's flying ability, and could only rely on its own efforts to flap its wings. Therefore, after it narrowly avoided the shadow demon's sneak attack, it swayed and fell down. The real Griffin wrestler had already attacked the blue magic sphere's life enchantment twice. The life enchantment's mana was only left with a little over 4,000 points. Stuart Phone, who was not paying attention to it at all, suddenly realized that the value that represented his HP had instantly plummeted. He quickly lowered his head, hurriedly mobilized his mana, and controlled the magic sphere to dodge the attack. However, during this process, the blue magic sphere once again suffered a full blow from the Griffin wrestler. The life enchantment's mana fell to only 3,000 points. The situation changed in an instant. From the seemingly equal intense battle to the current situation where the blue team was at a disadvantage. Only less than a minute had passed. However, this was the charm of a magic duel. The rhythm was so fast that it was suffocating. And the outcome of the duel was never predictable. What made Stuart Phone feel even more uncomfortable was that the cyanide baby dragon, that had clearly fallen into a chaotic state, actually chased after the shadow demon and flew over. Seeing the shadow demon and the cyanide baby dragon once again fighting, he knew that he could no longer wait. Shadow demon, attack with all your might. After the last order was given, Stuart Phone used all his strength to control the magic sphere to dodge. He did not pull the magic sphere up into the sky. The sky was the home ground of the flight type, and he could not avoid the Griffin Wrestler's pursuit no matter what. Under his control, the blue magic sphere flew into the Shadow Tomb's maze. Relying on the extreme turning and pulling, it continued to contend with the Griffin Wrestler, and successfully won a breather. After the Shadow Demon received the order, it immediately launched a fearless attack on the Cyanide Baby Dragon. And then, it really died. The Cyanide Baby Dragon also found a trace of clarity after being heavily injured, and turned into a dragon egg on the spot. The whole relatively chaotic situation was now very clear. From Dake's point of view, the only thing that Stuart Phone did not do well was that he did not order the Shadow Demon to kill the Ghost King in Jar, that was pinned down by Black Gaze on the spot. This kind of extremely cold method could actually maximize the benefits. But in the end, Stuart Phone did not do that. This was a big plus point for Dake. However, the senses of people and things would not affect the duel. Dake did not hold back at all and raised Pride on the spot. "Are you ready, Dilu Beast?" he said softly and quickly chanted a normal summoning spell. "In the name of Dake Dimung, I summon Pride." The brilliant light dispelled the darkness. The thin darkness that spread to the red half of the area was completely dispelled. The Dilu Beast stood under the pillar of light formed by Pride. Its body and limbs quickly elongated and turned into a tall human figure. As 4 snow-white wings appeared on its back, the holy and pure aura of an angel spread out. The fact that Dake Dimming had an angel was no longer a secret. The secret ritual academy of the Holy Church had already spread this news. But every time they saw the fairy beast evolve, it would still make those who were his fans feel incomparably excited. The egg model of the Dilu Beast would probably sell well for a while. When the fairy beast successfully evolved, the outer shell of the Vessel of Souls was shattered and finally revealed its inner essence. It was not a magic elf card. In fact, the Vessel of Souls was a ritual item that contained both a secret ritual card and an item card. It needed to meet certain conditions to activate. And when it was successfully activated, it would give birth to different types of Vessel of Souls, according to the amount of shadow energy absorbed into the body. Although the capacity of the Vessel of Souls had not been filled, it had already absorbed a 6-star magic elf, a 3-star magic elf card, and a 7-star magic elf. The fusion of these 3 types of shadow energy gave birth to an extremely terrifying Vessel of Souls. Boom! Inside the Vessel of Souls was a whirlpool that emitted a pitch-black light. The remnant souls of the Shadow Gravekeeper, Shadow Demon Ox, and Shadow Demon alternated within the whirlpool. The whirlpool exploded in an instant, and the Vessel of Souls that emitted a terrifying aura was born from within. The menus stopped attacking. The fantasy beast, ever-changing monster, returned to its original form and stood beside it. The fairy beast's eyes were filled with disgust. The 2 wings that extended outwards from its left wrist had already turned into a holy bow. It raised its right hand, and an arrow of light condensed between its 2 fingers. The battle was about to begin. The Vessel of Souls, that was born from the Vessel of Souls, had an appearance that was close to a human. It was tall and skinny, with bull horns on both sides of its head. It wore a golden mask on its face, had a pair of demonic wings on its back, and held a half-meter-long short staff in its hand. The short staff was emitting an extremely dangerous aura. However, there was not much joy on Stuart Phone's face. The Vessel of Souls ability to absorb energy was discounted. The Vessel of Souls, that was born from the remnant shadow energy of a 6-star, a 3-star, and a 7-star magic fairy was only equivalent to a 7-star magic fairy. Although there were differences between 7 stars, no matter how high it was, could it be higher than Dake Diming's fairy beast? Stuart Phone's heart was unusually heavy. Although the magic duel was known to have unlimited possibilities, the number of cards in the magic duel would gradually decrease. As the duel progressed, the number of magic cards left in the deck would gradually decrease. The Magus would have a very clear understanding of the extent of their abilities. The so-called possibilities were under the premise that there was a glimmer of hope. If there was not even a glimmer of hope, then what was left was only a best effort situation. Stuart Phone was mentally prepared to lose before the duel, but he did not expect to fall into such a best effort situation after the Vessel of Souls was born. Phew. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down as soon as possible. The duel was not over yet. His mission was not completed yet. He gambled on a non-existent possibility. Pull that high and mighty angel into the abyss of filth. Dark Vessel of Souls, Shadow Demon Claw. Stuart Phone pulled the blue magic ball to the side of the Vessel of Souls in an instant and tried to boost the morale of his team. The newly born Vessel of Souls floated in midair. After receiving the order, it raised the short staff in its hand high. A hoarse and unpleasant sound came from under the golden mask, as if silk was being torn apart. The sound seemed to be some kind of chant, but the short staff in its hand was already emitting a pitch-black light. The fairy beast immediately realized that the Vessel of Souls had targeted itself. It sneered in its heart and suddenly released the arrow in its hand. Bang! The bowstring was released. The holy arrow was shot out. The electric arrow that gathered light carried a strong electric light. It was like a light pillar that penetrated the entire arena. In the next second, a black vortex appeared. A pitch-black whirlpool appeared under the fairy beast's feet. A withered and terrifying demonic claw suddenly drilled out of the whirlpool and grabbed the fairy beast's ankle. Then the demonic claw suddenly exerted force, trying to pull the fairy beast into the abyss. The black substance that flowed out of the demonic claw spread up the fairy beast's tender skin and gradually dyed its calf black. A strong suction force also erupted from the whirlpool. The fairy beast was floating in the air with its 4 wings. At this moment, it was suddenly pulled down by this sudden attack. However, when the tip of its feet touched the whirlpool, the fairy beast suddenly spread its wings and stopped its downward momentum. It looked down with a cold gaze, and a blazing white light gathered under its gaze. The power of light gathered under its feet and gradually melted the shadow demon claw. The holy arrow that was shot out hit the Vessel of Souls' body without any deviation. The power of light poured into the Vessel of Souls' body through the arrow's head. After an instant explosion, it caused a large area of damage. The electric current carried by the arrow crawled up the Vessel of Souls' body, causing it to be paralyzed and unable to move. Although the electric current didn't last long, the Vessel of Souls quickly regained its normal mobility. However, when its lost consciousness gradually returned to normal, its body was already bound by the meanest long tail. It suddenly tightened. Pain immediately assaulted it. The Vessel of Souls felt as if its bones were being crushed, and its chest was suffocating. However, what really made it feel suffocated was the amazing charm that was madly squeezing its mind. Although it wasn't taking the initiative, it was indeed having the most intimate contact with the meanest. Experiencing the amazing charm of the meanest at such a close distance, the sure kill skill, beauty goddess, undoubtedly played its role. The Vessel of Souls was actually mesmerized when it was in deep danger. Although there was the suspension bridge effect, which caused people to confuse fear and emotions in times of crisis, the Vessel of Souls was obviously not affected by the suspension bridge effect. After it was completely mesmerized, it even felt that the feeling of being crushed into pieces wasn't too bad. It was a ridiculous illusion. In short, it was completely mesmerized and motionlessly accepted the meanness as punishment. Such a phenomenon even made the fairy beast, who was flying over, unable to do anything. The heaven's purple light on its fist repeatedly lit up and dimmed, and the smooth attack that was supposed to be tight was instantly interrupted. However, the next moment the menace suddenly loosened its body, leaving only the end of its tail to continue binding the vessel of souls' legs. Then it looked up at the fairy beast. The fairy beast instantly understood, and its right fist gradually emitted a beautiful and gentle purple light. Then with a soft roar, it threw a punch at the vessel of souls. Sure kill skill. Heaven's purple light. The purple light beam that shot out from the fist instantly pierced through the vessel of souls' chest. Heaven's purple light specifically targeted evil. Damage to demons increased by 100%, dark attribute damage increased by 50%, and evil attribute damage increased by 20%. The vessel of souls was both a demon and a dark attribute. Damage received increased by 150%. No matter how strong the vessel of souls' defense was, it could only accept its death under this punch. Vessel of souls, fatal infection. Stuart Phone's next order came urgently, but it was already too late. The vessel of souls' ultimate skill, fatal infection, could release an infectious ray from its eyes, causing the nearby target to be devoured by the shadow. The most obvious phenomenon was the change in the target's race and attribute. The target of fatal infection would become a devil type or a dark attribute during the infection period. If the vessel of souls was successfully cast, the fairy beast's ultimate skills would not be able to be used. This was the only card that Stuart Phone could flip over in this desperate situation. This card might not be able to change the final outcome, but it could bring more trouble to Dake Dimung and create a feeling of failure after trying your best. However, after the vessel of souls was enchanted by the menace, it could not respond to his orders at all. Stuart Phone still did not expect that the one who executed the vessel of souls was actually the menace, and not the fairy beast that killed it on the surface. After the vessel of souls was truly destroyed, the blue cube magic transducer ball was once again exposed to all sorts of dangers. The wrestling Hawkman Eye chased after the vessel of souls and completely shattered the remaining life enchantment of the blue cube magic transducer ball. Stuart Phone's magic power was reduced to 0. Beep. The whistle sounded. Winner, Dake Dimung. The thunderous applause that should have been heard did not appear on the spot. The audience seemed to have yet to react to the fact that the duel had ended. Originally, after Stuart Phone summoned the vessel of souls, the whole duel was getting more and more exciting. After the vessel of souls was finally born, it should have been the time for Stuart Phone to blow the bugle horn to attack. However, let alone the bugle horn to attack, there was not even a painful wail. Stuart Phone had lost just like that. A strong start but a weak finish. Many of the audience sighed because of this, but they did not know that Stuart Phone had tried his best. Papa Papa. The audience, who were disappointed, eventually joined in the wave of applause. The duel had officially ended. Dake placed his hand on the card table. Even after the duel had ended, he was still thinking about what kind of sure kill moves the vessel of souls had yet to unleash. Too bad the fairy beast was too fast. He estimated and began to pack up the magic transducer cards. Stuart Phone spoke at that moment. He said in a low voice, "In the end you still won." Dake raised his head and said with a smile, "It's a duel. There needs to be a winner." Stuart Phone was suddenly startled. After a while he said, "You're right." Dake smiled and said politely, "I hope there will be a chance to fight you again." "That's what I hope for as well." As Stuart Phone said that, he clenched his fists slightly. On the surface, the exchange between the two of them before and after the duel was very harmonious. In the corner of the ring, Angus Jeffrey stood up after watching the duel and quickly left. The events that happened after that no longer had any meaning to him. He would wait for Stuart Phone's report at the appointed place and prepare for next week's duel. Only victory could wash away the humiliation. The two contestants left the stage respectively. After Dake kept all the magic transducer spirits back into the cards, he walked down the stage. However, he did not leave. Instead, he quietly replenished the magic power of the magic transducer cards in the waiting room. Because he still had a duel this afternoon, Although the opponent of this duel was only a third-year student, since it was the regular schedule arranged by the duel club, he would abide by it. Until today, he still maintained a winning record in the Golden competition. However, the main reason was that the regular opponents arranged by the duel club were all third-year students. He could not understand the duel club's thinking, because the continuous victories obtained in this way could not really show his true strength. He slightly paid attention to the other second-year students who signed up for the Golden Cup, and seemed to be treated similarly. The opponents that the second-year students were normally matched with in the Golden Cup were either classmates of the same grade or third-year students who were one grade higher. This kind of care went against Professor Pawa Cheong-si's original intention of letting the second-year students participate in the Golden Cup. The second-year students did not get to see the absolute gap between themselves and the seniors in the Golden Cup. Some of them were even able to win against the third-year students in the Golden Cup. Although they were not able to use this to accumulate points in the elimination competition. In the current Golden Cup, Dake Dimming was the only second-year student in the Golden Cup who had the possibility of entering the main tournament. An hour later, Dark once again stepped onto the dueling stage. The third-year student facing him, however, seemed to lack the desire to duel. Regardless of whether it was his mental state or his attitude towards the duel, he couldn't be compared to Stuart Phone. It was as if he felt that he had no chance of winning from the beginning. Therefore, this duel was just a formality. Dake was not happy about this, but he did not say anything. Everyone had their own way of living. It was reasonable for him to give up on a duel that he was destined to lose. Therefore, after he won, he quickly stepped off the stage and did not say anything. And his schedule for this week had officially ended. Next, he went to the Magical Animal Society and released the magic elves one by one. Then he went to the Traveler's Street and went to the Citizen Duel Club's branch. The new batch of flower cards was directly sent to Eve, and they were selling like hotcakes. He walked into the shop and saw that other than Eve, there was only the maid from Scorpio Palace, Nai. Looks like the handover has been completed. Dake nodded slightly. Nai and Josie had been using Coffin of the Reaper since last Saturday. Nai changed her sleeping schedule to 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. Not long ago, she was still sleeping in Coffin of the Reaper. That's right, Dake did not add Coffin of the Reaper to the deck. While he was dueling in the outdoor arena, Coffin of the Reaper was still tirelessly absorbing the power of underworld fire. It was already past 2 in the afternoon. After washing up and eating, Nai went to the shop to swap with Josie. Josie was probably already asleep in Coffin of the Reaper. Her sleeping schedule was from 2 in the afternoon to 10 in the evening. Of course, there would definitely be some differences in the exact timing, but it was generally like that. They completely reversed day and night. During the day, before it was time to sleep, they would be in the library, roaming freely in the sea of knowledge. This period of time was not difficult for them to pass. Other than rarely seeing young master in the academy, everywhere else was as comfortable as a vacation. And as time passed, Coffin of the Reaper's proficiency level continued to increase, and it could clearly differentiate between underworld fire and human souls. After such a long period of experimentation, both Nai and Josie indicated that their souls were not damaged. This meant that Coffin of the Reaper's ability had been fully proven. Dake had already completed the first of the 3 experimental goals that he had set, and the results of the second and third goals would be out in the next 2 days. Considering that he still had to observe the changes caused by flower cards in the next 2 days, Dake decisively gave up on his plan to enter the secret tunnel again before November ended. As the saying went, plans could not keep up with changes, so he could only postpone the secret tunnel exploration plan to December. The sales of flower cards continued to increase. During this period of time, it had accumulated a good reputation, and many students were waiting for the opening of Traveler's Street. According to Eve, the most popular period was between the opening of the shop at 12 and 2, and Dake happened to miss it. The students rushed into the shop and excitedly chose the flower brand that they liked. Josie, who was not good at dealing with such matters, was flustered and almost made a fool of herself. Now that the smooth and slick Nai had taken over Josie's job, she cooperated with Eve to tidy up the shop. Dake didn't interrupt their work. After understanding the situation, he started his planned shopping. He had used up a large amount of basic materials in this week's experiment, so he had to buy everything that he lacked. And with the increase of Moon God's version of bliss, he was also considering continuing to make it, so he needed to buy the corresponding basic materials and supplementary materials. In addition, since Sunday was already the first day of December, if he wanted to try to make Carp King or Violent Carp Dragon next week, he also needed to buy supplementary materials in advance. Carp King was a pure water elemental magic guide sprite. Violent Carp Dragon was water and flying. Violent Carp Dragon's super evolved form was water and evil. Therefore, during the refining process, it was necessary to consider adding materials of the flying element and the evil element. Only then could the results be more accurately directed towards them. However, Dake's fondness for Carp King and Violent Carp Dragon was mainly due to his feelings. Under the current circumstances, even if they were really made, they could only be added to the deck as a single card without a connection, and it would not enhance the deck much. Therefore, there was no rush to make them. For now, he could only walk around and take a look. He had learned how to walk around the stalls. There were some high-quality materials that the seniors put on the street stalls to sell, and he would occasionally buy and store them. The shopping time was always very short. When Dake came back to his senses, there was already a fiery sunset on the horizon. He picked out some food from the restaurant and brought it to the shop to eat a simple dinner with Eve and Nai, and he also checked the sales situation. The sales situation was very good. However, Eve frowned when she mentioned it. The sales are indeed very fast, but it seems that because there is a limit on the number of items that each person can buy, it has instead stimulated the consumption. Basically, all the customers have bought a total of 3 Magic Guide Sprite cards since noon. And I don't know who leaked it, but they probably already know that our flower brand is a limited product, and sales will be suspended after the clearance. After she said that, Dake subconsciously looked at the maid Nai. Nai immediately shut her mouth, shook her head hard and retorted, "Nai is not a big mouth." "That's true." Dake nodded. Although Nai looked like a big mouth, as a combat maid of the Scorpio Palace, she had been specially trained to keep her mouth shut. This way, the person who leaked the information could only be Eve or Josie, who wasn't here. That should be it. Dake couldn't help but rub his brows. In contrast to Nai, Josie was completely tight-lipped. However, if she really leaked the information, she might not even realize it herself. Perhaps this was the difference between the Scorpio Palace maids and the Leo Constellation maids. But this is a good thing, Dake said casually. After the news of the limited supply spread, there would only be more people coming to buy the flower brand. 3,000 flower brand cards. If each person bought 3 cards, there would be 1,000 people. Considering that many of the 6th grade students weren't in the castle, 1,000 people were definitely more than enough. If there were students who wanted to collect flower brand cards, they might ask others to buy them on their behalf. Of course, this wasn't a bad thing. Originally, it was unrealistic for everyone to have a flower brand card. If the flower brand cards were given out by the school to everyone, it would be a disfigurement. It would easily cause reverse psychology and reduce the effect of the flower brand. Thus, his goal was to distribute the flower brand cards to everyone as much as possible. According to the current sales, if everything went smoothly, this small goal could be achieved by the end of the weekend. At that time, not to mention whether or not he could harvest Moon God's version of Nirvana, the breeder hiding in the school would also be exposed. According to Professor Midya's prediction, they would have to go through a lot of twists and turns in order to uncover the truth. Then, the traces at the beginning should be revealed. He had a feeling that perhaps the plan of using the flower brand cards to find the initial target would succeed. After 10 p.m. that night, Josie opened her eyes in the death coffin. Like a vampire, she pushed open the coffin lid and sat up. Since she had laid out the bedding in the coffin before she slept quite comfortably. After she got up, she habitually looked inside her body to check the situation of underworld fire. In the past week, Most of the underworld fire in her body had been absorbed by the death coffin. Yesterday, there was only a small flame left. Today, after lying in the death coffin for 8 hours, the small flame became even weaker. She knew that the final moment was coming. The remaining underworld fire would probably be completely consumed by the death coffin in an hour or two, and the final result of the experiment would be revealed after that. If the experiment failed, the magical power she obtained from the underworld fire and the memories related to it would completely disappear. That was definitely not a good thing. "How is it?" Nainai asked casually as she licked her milkshake. Josie said, "You can inform young master tomorrow that it's time for the final experiment." 12K. It's the last day of 2021. Brothers, do you have any more monthly tickets? If you don't, they will expire. Since June 26, 2020, I coincidentally entered the cat station and walked all the way until now. From the number 1 newcomer to the number 1 of the year. I really want to have a happy ending in this last month. I want to end with the number 1 monthly ticket. Can you give me the monthly ticket? Howl. Ors, I'm too tired. I'm going to sleep first. I'll continue writing when I wake up. 19K before 6 a.m. tomorrow. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.